that. I made it just in time.
Okay.
Welcome to the 12 Puzzles podcast. This is June. We're doing San Francisco, and we're going to be talking about other things involving the secret. I got Mark, Douglas, and Chuck is joining us this month. And what's up, fellas?
Welcome aboard, Chuck.
Thanks. Thank you. Good to be here.
All right, Chuck,
more dedicated researchers out there.
Chuck, one of the people that understands the illusion of the secret.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, I kind of started making a list of some of the different techniques, and illusion is huge. And I think we all use it. That Eric put a name to it. And so, that's one thing we should probably look at as far as the different, some of these things are obvious. So the wordplay, typographical terror is typographical errors. And I found another one too. Some of you guys might know it. It's called polysemes. That's a kind of a cute word for words with multiple meanings, like loophole.
Yeah.
And I think that loophole applies to both San Francisco and New York. But I don't know if we want to get into that part. But
and there's a loop in the Milwaukee painting too.
Oh. Okay.
Juggling in a loop.
Oh yeah, gotcha. So,
all right, Douglas, all that traffic is getting picked up.
Yeah,
sounds like he's at a racetrack.
Some of the challenge, I think, with this, guys, and the techniques, from a probability standpoint, I think you just have to go with the high probability stuff. Because once you start, right, if you take something and it's got 5 interpretations, which one is it? And how do you know?
You're right.
So that's why you have to, I think you have to take the high probability stuff, the high probability methodologies, and put a lot of chips on those, right? Not everything, but the more you go away from that, the more odds are that you're wrong. And so eventually so I think you just got to be careful with this, with methodologies, and you got to go with the high probability ones first.
But high probability comes from lots of evidence on one specific item.
Potentially. Yes.
But as an example, whole bunch of clues, and you're adding up to the same thing. Like the giants, if you have a puzzle with a giant in it, it's a high probability that puzzle involves New York and San Francisco.
Yep.
Well, as an example,
and Chicago.
Clock hands and fairy hands pointing to the box. That's one you should be able to take to the bank every time.
All right.
Right?
We disagree on what's high probability.
True. Well, in my opinion, that's a very obvious, methodology that's used, and therefore
I can bend those clock hands to point to anything I want.
Can you?
If I really want to. So
if I give you 3 options, you should be able to discern what looks like the best fit. No,
we're drawing straight lines to things that I could do that all day.
Well, then let me ask you this. Do you think that's not a methodology that the painter used to help us find the box?
I think that might still be up in the air. I don't think that you can definitely rely on that all the time.
I think it's 100%. If he's showing you hands or clocks, that those are pointing to the box location. That's just my view. It's 100%. That he doesn't put those in there and not using them to do that.
The time. The time is what we got to focus on.
Yeah, that's what I believe. The time is more important than where you think those hands are pointing.
I think it's a super crucial. This is just me. It's 100% that, for example, if he uses it in one, he's not going to use it in others. That's a methodology that is used throughout. Because it wouldn't make sense, right? It wouldn't make sense to have it. Hey, he's using the fairy hands to point to the box in one, and then not in another one.
Yeah,
Now,
and
now,
that's one of the things I wanted to look at today. And if you look at Alibi Elf, and there's some things in there that are common to tax burden, for instance. Where are these guys looking? Where are their eyes looking?
Yeah.
You'll find that commonality where the eye is looking. And in the tax burden, excuse me, one eye looks in one spot, the other eye looks in another spot. One eye is New York, one eye is San Francisco. Now
Maybe.
the Alibi Elf, and you'll see references to eye and eyes throughout the writings.
Yep.
So
It's in the spotter's tips, the Alibi Elf.
Right, and you look at Alibi Elf. What is the Nixon figure doing? Page what is that? 120, 128. What's Nixon doing? The character that looks like Nixon. Nixon.
Can
of
we
course,
show that on the screen? We should show that on the screen.
Yeah. I have one way to do it, and the other way to do it is to try to upload it. And I asked.
Well,
I'm not sure how to upload.
I'm not either.
Share. I could try to share on here, but I need this place.
I'll do it.
It's page the top of page 128.
Yeah. All right. Keep going.
I mean everything. Okay. You see in the Alibi Elf in that photo, you got the gavel. The gavel's in another. Is it in the tax burden?
Yeah, well, let me run down a few of these things that I see here, and then you can pick it apart, or you say that's baloney or whatever. First of all, there's a giant gavel and a giant sound block. Again, it's a giant. Well, now it's just there for artistic. Oh, that'll look good, but it's you're talking about justice. You're talking about trickery and what happened to if you go through this. What happened to Robert Stroud? If you do the history, he had a lot of raw deals. He was tricked. He's offered many deals, and people backstabbed him with his publications, and where you're not going to this prison or you're going to get these privileges. So the theme of Alibi Elf is excuses and trickery. That thus,
so
tricky.
How are you pinpointing this to a particular puzzle?
That's what I'm going to get to. But if you put it all together, it makes sense. I can jump to the punchline if you want. Okay, look at Alibi Elf. What is Nixon holding up? Eyeglasses. Why is he holding up eyeglasses? He wants you to look. And what do you need eyeglasses for? To look closely. And where are they looking? Well, first of all, the justice or judge, his eyes are shut. A justice or judge with his eyes shut, that's blind justice. So he's kind of blind, but what's right under his nose? There's something right under his nose, and I need to get to that point. And Nixon is looking down. What is Nixon looking at? And you have to look closely. If you have eyeglasses or a magnifying glass, you can see it. You can see it with the naked eye, but you got to look really close. In addition, there's a shadow under the gavel that's long, that goes all the way to the end. It stops. And what's beyond that? Can you see it? You got to look close or zoom in. Okay. And look at Nixon's shirt. What's on his shirt? Look at his wrist. Why did they draw his wrist that way, like they're threads? They drew his wrist like that so you can see what's on his shirt. If you zoom on his shirt, what do you see? A dot. What is a dot? It's an ace. Look at the shadowing under their feet. The only one that has a very prominent shadow is the judge. What is in the shape of? An oval. What is a dot when you look at it from an edge like that? It's an oval. So what we're looking for here is aces. There's an ace under the judge. And if you look at the gavel and the sound block from above, it's an ace. That's right under the judge's nose. He's standing on an ace. Nixon has an ace on his shirt. And what is Nixon looking at the very end of the gavel on the ground? It's a dot. Do you see it? If
Yeah.
not, you may need to get your glasses on. There's a dot. It's a
I'm
tiny,
looking at it. I'm looking at it through my phone zoomed in.
you see the dot? It's
Yeah.
a tiny dot. And so Nixon is looking at that tiny dot. Now, why is he looking down there? Well, he's standing, or he is on an ace, or think of it as an ace. He's going to have to take a step to get there where he's looking, a giant step. And what is a giant step? It's 3 feet. How many papers is he holding? 3. How many buttons are on it's called the Black Dan, which is Daniel Webster. It was his nickname. There's 3 buttons right there. And if you look at the feet on Black Dan, what do you see? You see a 3 and you see a 5. The exact same thing you see on the Job Goblin's feet. The guy hanging from a rope, you see a 3 and a 5 on his shoes. Just exactly like that.
Hey, Eric, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Chuck.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Eric, I've got it up on the screen if you want to.
So right there, you're talking about probability. What's the probability that both those guys have a 3 on one foot, a 5 on another foot, that on the same kind of more similar shoes? That's not just luck.
I see the 3 and 5 too.
Yeah. So 3 and 5.
So Chuck, how are you tying this to? I'm just wondering. You've got pretty deep interpretation here, but how do you know what puzzle this is referring to?
Okay, that's where I was going to start with this whole thing. If I was going to go through my whole spiel, but I thought we're going to run out of time. Okay, when you look at this, you have a justice. You have I took some notes here. Let's see. Nixon.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the stuff that's right in your face. So you got a gavel, that's courts. You got a judge, that's courts.
Oh, yeah.
That's to New York, because you also have a lawyer in a court shown in the small business man.
What's the verse say? I'll go to that real quick. The verse says, here we go. Education and justice for all to see. Well, the education, what's the guy holding? Black Dan. He's holding some books. That's education. There's a justice there. And it says, near ace is high, giant pole, giant step. Okay, that sets the stage. That's the San Francisco. And if you go back on the other page with the Alcatraz guy, where's Alcatraz? That's Alibi Elf. It's in San Francisco. Alcatraz. Exactly. So, and you can go through a whole bunch of other things that point to San Francisco for Alibi Elf. And what's the last line?
I don't know. You're saying a guy sitting in prison necessarily is Alcatraz.
What's above his head? It's a bird. He's the Birdman, Robert Stroud.
Birdman, the movie.
Birdman. There's a movie. There's several movies. The Birdman of Alcatraz. He was in Alcatraz, but the interesting thing, a little trivia, he didn't have birds at Alcatraz. Where did he have birds? He had in Leavenworth.
Yeah.
So
the imagery of Nixon would point to California, because Nixon, in the history of all the presidents of the United States, Nixon and Reagan are the only 2 that were born in California.
There is just a ton of evidence that this is San Francisco.
Then the Birdman points you specifically to Alcatraz, San Francisco, California.
Absolutely.
These are exactly
how these clues why are your solves not involving Alcatraz?
Because Alcatraz gets you to San Francisco, and Alcatraz is the justice that you see. You see it from the start point, and you also see it from the finish point. Yeah. You can see it from the Tower of Coit Tower.
For all to see in the verse, Byron's telling you, use your eyes.
Right, and also,
it's the reader's interpretation to determine, does this have something to do with finding the treasure, or is this just a clue to San Francisco? Once you go through all the Alcatraz stuff and Birdman, you go, this doesn't lead anywhere. This is just a clue to San Francisco, and that's it.
Right. From a bigger picture standpoint, and I've tried to get you guys on board with this idea, is can he be in San Francisco and not feature Alcatraz somehow?
Well, sure,
it's
but
so important and so it's so important and so historic. If you show me a solve that includes views of Alcatraz and one that doesn't, then I'm going to tell you the one that does is far more likely, and you shouldn't spend any time on one that doesn't, because
What can you
it's
see
so
out?
important.
Wait, what can you see out of the window at Coit Tower at the top? You see Alcatraz. There's a
Okay,
window in
so
that picture. And let's go back to the other image though. I want to finish that up.
Are you guys with me though on that big picture concept that if you don't include something as key and as instrumental and as important and historic and iconic in San Francisco, what the fuck is he doing in San Francisco if he's not going to feature those things that make it so special? He could be in any city.
Okay. Let me answer that.
He could be in any city.
Yeah, but that's what Allusion is.
Exactly.
You have to feature Alcatraz. You have to.
He can't. Yeah, he does with that imagery in the picture right there.
Right.
Once you figure out that that's the movie, you know it's out. Yeah, but when you use illusion techniques, you don't say Alcatraz. You don't say Golden Gate Bridge.
Well, of course not.
That makes if you go, okay, there's two cities. LA and San Francisco, we know are featured, but how do we prove it? If the painting had a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge, there's no more research required. There's Golden Gate Bridge. It's so like yeah, but it's so iconic. That makes it too easy.
Oh, Eric, come on. All right, so look, up in Golden Gate Park, you do not get Alcatraz. That alone should eliminate Golden Gate Park. Period.
You don't need Alcatraz. Alcatraz is just.
I just told you why.
No, Alcatraz is just to prove the city.
If he doesn't feature Alcatraz, he's showing you here in one entire picture Alcatraz.
Right.
But how many people know that is imagery of that movie that has to do with Alcatraz?
But overall, if I ask, hey, anyone off the street, anywhere, and I say, what's going on in San Francisco? Like, where are the places you'd want to go? Alcatraz is going to be a top 3, maybe a top 2.
And
so
where
all
can
I'm
you
saying is it's so important. It's so so iconic. He's not going to just make it, oh, well, guess what? San Francisco has Alcatraz. And up here in Golden Gate Park is this incredible flower bed in this Japanese garden. I mean, that makes no sense.
Mark, I kind of agree with you there. And you can see Alcatraz from Aquatic Bay. You can see Alcatraz from Coit Tower.
So those should be higher than anything in GGP in terms of salt.
Well, I don't believe in the Golden Gate Park. That's the main thing they're talking about.
Good.
That is for
it's not there.
I'm not there either. So.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying, like, this is just big picture stuff that if people actually thought through it, they could avoid going down all these rabbit holes in places where it's just not going to be. It's a very low probability.
You've got to go down these rabbit holes.
Well,
there's no other way around it.
The right ones, Eric.
If you're not using it's the rabbit holes are the clues in the book that Byron left you. If you're not using them,
doesn't he kind of
anything you come up with, you're making up?
No, I'm not.
I'm talking about just common sense. If he's showing you all this stuff, and we're talking Alcatraz of all places, historic, iconic, you see it from many places in the Bay. If you don't include that, just like the Statue of Liberty of all things in New York, you can't be right.
I mean,
you can't be right.
Well, you have to figure out.
Right.
You have to figure out in these drawings and the art in the back of the book. You have to figure out this drawing goes with which puzzle. This one obviously goes with San Francisco. That gives you a clue and a starting point.
I'd say that's a higher probability than others. Yes.
So then you start looking at why are certain things in the drawing. Like why is is Birdman so big? Why is the gavel so big? Links to giants. But which in the giants?
I think that's stretchy.
It's not. If you look at the giants and you figure out the clues in the giants, you will see the back of the book. And I'm telling you what he did. And this is my opinion. You can take it or leave it.
That's illusion too. All the giant connections are all illusion, connecting different puzzles of the secret.
If I showed this to 100 people, would 100 people look at that guy and say, "Well, that's a giant"? I don't think so.
He is compared to the elf.
Okay, but I'm just saying, like, the initial impressions when I look at this, elves are really small, by the way.
Hey,
So
Chuck,
if I look at
does
does this make this guy a giant? In your mind, it does. I don't think that's obvious. Let's just
Well,
say
it's a
I've
giant
got
gavel.
Spirit
You're
of
gonna
76.
tell me that's not a giant gavel on the other
Let's
page?
just hang on a second. If I got Spirit of 76, where it's a skyline of New York, and the ferry is on the Staten Island ferry, I don't think you can claim that puzzle, that story relates to anything other than New York City. It's very blatantly
It
obvious.
does. It is.
This
It is
one,
New York City.
I would just tell you, I wouldn't look at this myself and say, wow, that guy's giant. He looks proportional to this jail cell he's in. The elf is the one that looks small. So you're seeing a giant, but I don't think that invokes giant at all. It just says there's a small elf sitting next to a normal sized person.
Man, that's a giant. The small businessman, that's a giant.
So
small businessman is New York also, by the way.
This
And
is very subjective.
And also with Alcatraz,
are linked together.
You got Clint Eastwood.
That guy is not a giant, in my opinion. I don't think many people would agree with that.
Hey, Chuck, how does this help you at all when you're on the ground over in San Francisco? Any of this?
Yes, it does. Actually, both this one and the other image, if you put the other image up. And that's the point I was going to get to.
Okay.
You have to be at the correct spot for these drawings to work. If you go to the other image.
But why not the painting? Why aren't you using the painting?
Because the back of the book is for localization. And that's what I was going to talk about and get everybody stirred up. The back of the book,
nobody used the back of the book.
Byron was asked by a reporter about the back of the book, and he said, you don't need it to solve these puzzles. And if you think about it, that is a true statement. It localizes where they are. You can solve these puzzles using the image and the verse. And when he did that first time, and he said to the publisher, to his boss, here, I want to make this a book. They probably said, well, it's too skinny. We can't charge very much money. So he said what all editors do and people who write, they fatten it up. How did he fatten it up? By putting localization stuff in the back, stuff that complemented his.
What if you have a conflict between what the painting is showing you where the box is?
There is
versus
no
a
conflict
story?
If you solve it. If you have a conflict, something's wrong in your assumption or interpretation.
Well, I'm showing you clock hands pointing to Battery Lancaster, and that stands in direct conflict to your interpretation.
What clock hands are you pointing to? You talking about the 6 o'clock or whatever it says?
Well,
what time is San Francisco?
And the fairy hands point to
the clock. You want to talk about the clock? You know why the clock there? Just because it's a shadow puzzle, just like New York. If you take June the 6th, you plug it into the Sun Calc program, it'll give you an azimuth, and it'll tell you like 5 or 6 feet of an object that is 37 inches. And you know
how
what
many
that
people could do that back in 1981?
You don't have to if you were there at that date and time. If you're there at that date and time, you don't have to. Come on, man.
Well, all right. I guess there's one day of the year that you have to be there.
Right. Or no, not one day. Because if you look at the actual shadow links, they only change a little bit over, like, I don't know, a couple weeks. It doesn't have to be exact. Not only that, he gave you another method. He gave you the 3, 4, 5 triangles on New York and San Francisco on both of them.
Bigger question is if there's a conflict to box location,
there's no
using the fair people versus the painting.
There's no conflict.
Well, I would tell you there is, according to your interpretation.
Then somebody's in the wrong place.
Right. So I'm saying is what I'm challenging you on is what has greater importance? Is it the fair people, or is it the verse or the painting?
Well, I said the verse and the painting will get you to the spot, but it's not an exact. It's very close. You can probably find it if you're, you just have to be, in the right spot.
So I've showed you guys.
If you use the back and you supplement the verse and the image, JJP's painting, with the back of the book will tell you exactly where the cask is, but you have to be at that spot to put it all together. If you go back to what we were initially talking about,
Eric, can you throw this up just for a second? So this is my challenge, Chuck, and I think this is really important in terms of.
Oh, I seen that. I know where you're going with that. Go ahead.
So as I'm saying is like, how can I be anywhere else than where the fairy's pointing? I mean, I can't personally be anywhere else because she's pointing right there.
She's giving you directions. She's on one hand, it says she's giving you 6 blocks. On the other hand, 8 blocks. You start at Aquatic Bay, 6 blocks one way, 8 blocks over. You're at Telegraph Hill, Coit Tower. She's not pointing to a specific spot. She's giving you directions. You made a bad assumption. I'm sorry. It doesn't work.
You don't think that fairy hand is pointing to the box?
No, it's not. You know what's pointing to the box? And I have a better thing. I wish I could put it up.
But isn't it fascinating that I tell you that the clues lead you to Battery Lancaster, and I've shown you a bunch of fits for that, and then I have fairy hands pointing to on the map, at least to what looks like that same area.
Can you see this at all? I don't know.
So what I'm saying is, like, I'm going to look at the painting and I'm going to prioritize the painting, especially when they're fairy hands. And if I can triangulate and orient myself, for me personally, this is a huge tell on where the box is.
But you made one assumption based on one thing, and it's wrong, to be honest. I'm sorry. You can't take one squiggly line and say, oh, look, these squiggly lines match. Therefore, it is.
Well, the fairy hand.
I see the coastline match. Even when you come down to the bottom, you can see the little jet out.
That's the yacht club.
I mean,
but
it looks the same.
That might have been painted just to give you a clue to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Well,
not particularly Battery
again,
Lancaster.
is it a weird coincidence that I'm showing you a way to get to the same spot, not using this?
Well, I'll show you a way to get to another spot looking at JJPs. If you follow the black leaf, why is it a black leaf? Because it's in the shadow. Follow the point of that black leaf that's under the table, if you will. It's pointing down to an X, like X marks the spot. Continue your line down. Where does it go? All the way down to the end of the tail, where the tail is pointing to a cross. What does a cross mean? It means something's buried there. And what is the last thing in a tail? It's a loop, like loophole. And what's in the center of the loop? One circle. It's a dot, an ace. You're going from an ace to an ace.
Does a cross always mean something's buried there, though? I mean,
no. Does a finger always mean you're pointing at? Am I pointing at you?
She's pointing somewhere.
Am I pointing at you?
This is what the stories and the clues in the book are there to make determinations on what that really means.
Exactly.
See, my opinion. You look at this painting and you don't see baseball anywhere until you start to break down that.
Hang on a second. Can you record? Can I record that? Say that one more time. I'm gonna record that.
That's illusion.
Because when you put a baseball, I'm gonna play that. I'm gonna post that up into the chat.
Actually, you find that baseball field in the rows, right?
Why is he showing Monty Irvin? Why is he showing the San Francisco Giants? Why is he showing the New York Giants? Keyword Giants.
Not every clue or theme is going to lead you to the box. There's just too many of those.
When you say baseball, what does an Asian woman have to do with that? This is the stuff you have to research. What do Asians have to do with sports?
There is some like not famous, but there are baseball fields like right in here at Fort Winston. So
yeah, but the most historic football and baseball fields are in the north end of Golden Gate.
But they're not. The fairy's not pointing. There's my point.
And the rose and the flower conservatory is also in the north end of Golden Gate.
You guys don't want to believe the clock in Charleston. Well, that's fine, but I choose to because it's pointing to the spot.
Well, you're of the opinion that every clock is going to point to where the cask is.
Correct.
And I disagree. I think Byron is smart enough.
Why? Tell me what evidence do you have?
The same way.
What evidence do you have that that's not the case?
I'm just making an assumption that
because the 3 found puzzles, if you overlay the clock, either based on the imagery right in front of you, like the fence in Chicago, or you use north in Boston, it points to right where the casks were. 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 8 o'clock. 3 strikes, you're out. There's no way to question that. That if 3 are correct, it's correct.
But why not take the easy interpretation? If he's showing us clocks and fingers clearly doing this and pointing, it either is or it isn't. It's either something you can rely on across all puzzles or it isn't, right? There's no way he would say, well, in these 5 puzzles, I'm going to show you a fairy doing this, and then it's not actually pointing. So you're either all in on this one or all out. Yes. I choose to be all in because I've shown you very logical ways to apply clock and fingers to the puzzles. So like when you guys show me Coit Tower, I can't get on Coit Tower because the fairy's not pointing there unless you can show me how the fairy is pointing to Coit Tower.
It's the black leaf. Follow the black leaf.
No, I'm talking the fairy hands. The fairy. She's saying over here.
Well, again, these are individual puzzles. I don't think Byron wanted them all the same. Oh, we solve them all by the clock pointing at this.
Just showed you. I just told you.
By shadows pointing at
Logically, it makes no sense to have the fairy and the clocks pointing to the box in one puzzle and not in others. It either is or it isn't.
I think it makes sense. He made them different.
Well, in the end, he has to give you. But see, this is the thing. He left everything open to your interpretation. This is part of what makes this book so difficult.
Yeah.
The only verse that he's actually given you direct directions to the box is Montreal, west off Whitestone. But then you got to figure out how far is 12 paces.
New York is very explicit in the verse. He takes half the verse.
It's a combination of a whole bunch of clues. They're puzzle pieces that you got to put them all together and figure out. And every one of these puzzles has a theme. One's science, one's sports, one's the Civil War,
Teddy Roosevelt.
One's the Battle of Fort Sumter.
All of them are Teddy Roosevelt.
Hey, Mark, is Boston the one that has 5 steps?
I haven't.
All of the puzzles have the exact same 5 steps as the Boston puzzle.
No, I never said that.
Well, I'm using your argument that he does the same thing in each puzzle. Same.
JJP certainly has recurring methodologies, and so does Byron. But they're not all the same, right? But I think you can make inferences.
Why would he make 12 puzzles that all worked exactly the same?
Yeah, they're all different, right? They don't.
Yeah,
like Charleston. I was telling someone the other day. Someone messaged me and said, "You said the address is in the painting," and I said, "Yeah, it is. It's in the part of the address is in the painting. Part of the address is in the book."
I agree.
He actually gives you the address of the park. Once you get far enough into the story and deciphering clues, and you go,
no,
and say I go, oh, I think it's Johnson Park. You start to research Johnson Park. And what I did is I said, what's the address of this place in Charleston? Okay, there's the address. Is this in the? There's the exact number and the name of the park in one of the stories and in the painting.
And is the latitude and longitude in every single painting?
No.
Most of them, I think.
That's proof that he didn't use the same technique in every single puzzle.
Okay, so is there a fairy in every painting?
Yes.
Is there a fairy in every painting?
Yes. You got to have 2 or pairs. That's what the book says.
Is there a clock in every painting?
No.
Okay, so I would argue to you, in the paintings that have clocks, they are pointing to the box. One of those hands, either the small hand or the big hand.
Well, Milwaukee's got a clock, but it's in an illustration of the book. That
I don't
a
count
story
that.
That's meant.
I'm
for
talking.
Milwaukee.
This is a JJP methodology of helping us get to the box location.
Well, the San Francisco has a clock and it has hands with fingers, and they're not pointing to the same spot.
Well, yes, they are. In fact, Eric, can you put that up?
Yeah, but see, listen. To get real with that, Mark, JJP said he does not know. He doesn't know the path to get there.
Yeah.
The path.
And you're
is
not
good.
taking any.
See,
Yeah,
everybody that was involved with the book, Byron gave each one of them tidbits of clues to put in the illustrations. Joellen put them in the dolls. Ben Asen took photos of specific places. The two writers wrote about it. We don't even know which stories which one of them
So
actually
let
wrote.
me ask you this. If the Golden Gate Bridge is in the backdrop of where the box is, do you think JJP would know the box is somewhere near the Golden Gate Bridge? I mean, of course he would. Does he know the exact spot? No.
Well, I think he does know the exact spot, but he claims not to. So
Well,
Yeah,
he said he was
clearly
sent.
would remember something like the Golden Gate Bridge in the photos without
Well,
having the
yeah.
photos.
He said he was sent
Right
images
back
by Byron that he did not know what they were, and Byron just said add it to the painting.
Well, the problem is the more he says I know, the more people are going to pester him for the rest of his life about this, right?
Well, they will anyway. He does know stuff, and I've said this before. They know. It's like if we all did the book, and I said, Mark, your clue is the fireman. You know that, but if I was a reader of the book and I said, hey, Mark, has this got to do with firemen? You go, no. Oh, like, holy
we're
crap.
talking about the
So
painting,
if
right?
you say yes,
Pictures that
you don't
Byron
know
took
if
at
you're
the
giving
box
it all
locations
away
that
or
he
not.
forwarded on to JJP.
Yeah,
JJP,
there's a
now,
reason
there's
why
some
they signed.
spots, I'm sure. Look at Lake
Well,
Cleveland.
They signed NDAs. They all did because they each had a combination to the puzzle, and they're not sure if you would have told me yes, it has to do with firemen. You don't know if you're giving it all away by saying yes. You know, where Byron say no, don't tell him. Let him figure it out.
Hey, Eric, can you put up this one? So the question is, what is this rose? It's clear, and that's not very.
There's a baseball diamond.
This rose is not a rose, correct?
There's an A. You see the A? A's in the painting twice.
I'm just saying, like this thing, it's an odd shape. You've got this little nub out here that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually a very good
That's
fit.
that's called candlestick point. Thank you.
Well, I mean, show us how you align that, I guess, is what I'd like to see.
It's a red herring.
Interestingly enough, I'm showing you how the
It's a red
rose is
herring.
actually the battery, because the battery is right in the very middle right here. If you go and look at that closely enough. But this matches this area. So I've got another thing pointing to this area. Now, if you can show me a better fit for the rose to an area in San Francisco, I'm more than willing to see it. But this is
so Byron would have to fly over that area to know what it looked like.
no.
Take pictures
Yeah,
so that JJP could make the rose look like that.
JJP is an incredible visualization guy.
So he knew it from the ground.
100%.
Look, my interpretation. I understand. I see what you're doing.
And that looked
here with
exactly
Battery
like that.
Lancaster. But Battery
Exactly
Lancaster is
showing
not
you the
in the
proof.
book.
I'm showing you the proof in the painting that the clock hands and the fairy hands are both pointing to this area. Now, if you can show me a better interpretation of what this rose is, and when you zoom in on the very middle of it, you'll see the outline of the battery and the fact that Fort Point over here.
What about those top bumps? Those top bumps don't match.
Show me a better. It's very stylized, but show me a better match for the rose.
Well, people say that's the Fairmont thing. What do you think about that?
Well, look at the rose stem. What is the rose stem doing?
I don't
It's
care about
forming
that.
a
I care
loop.
about the rose.
forming
That's
a
where the
loop.
clock hands point.
Look at the Fairmont.
Now,
How it's
just
written.
look at this.
It's loops and curls.
Okay.
Kind of
I'm
rose.
just saying,
There you
the
go.
rose is not really a rose. It's something else.
Right. It's a red herring. It stands out in so.
Well, let's just look at the rose logically. Okay,
The
if someone
clock
says
hand is
rose,
pointing to the rose.
but if
clock
they said
hand
rose in
is
San
pointing to the
Francisco, where do you go?
Pete Rose.
Yeah, Pete
Pete
Rose.
Rose?
There's
Pete
two
Rose.
roses, right?
There's a
Pete Rose
million
and Pete
interpretations.
Rose is hidden. Pete Rose is hidden in Latin and backwards. Byron did not expect you to look at that
But
and
what
immediately know what it
area
was.
is this clock hand pointing to? It's represented in the rows. So if you can find the place that matches the rows, you've got a winner because the clock hands are pointing there.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
where are they
But
pointing?
no. With the clock,
where's
dude,
the clock
you're
hand
using
pointing?
12 o'clock. You're not using 6.
Look,
One of the
the clock
clock
hands are
hands-
pointing. The clock hands are
If
pointing
you-
straight up. I could put that anywhere. I could write a straight line from anywhere. That I don't like that clock hand thing.
I'm showing you a clock hand pointing to a spot, and I'm triangulating that and overlaying it on a map. It's very
Yeah,
quite simple.
but what I'm
no.
saying with your overlay is the time is 6 o'clock. You're using 12 o'clock there.
Yeah.
I'm using a
Well,
clock hand.
JJP
The
said that he didn't like overlays. That
the
they didn't
paintings
use
are all
overlays.
oriented north, south, east, west. 6 o'clock is south. So in the painting there, you're using north and you're using 12, not 6.
I'm using a clock hand, Eric.
I know.
Ben
I know,
Azen
but
also
the
said
time
that
is
overlays
fixed.
are
Well,
not a
then
thing.
go find me a better fit for. Well, this is one. It seems rather central. It's right in the middle of the painting. It's very
Yeah.
prominent.
I
If
see
you-
I
if
see
you're
the
gonna
the
follow
roads
that down
partially line up. The point lines up. I
does.
see what you're doing there.
Well,
I'm the
just
book
showing
guy.
you this fit.
I
So show
looked-
me a better fit for this.
I looked in the
So,
book.
look,
The battery Lancaster is not in the book. So if Byron ain't referencing it, it's not a spot where a treasure is going to be buried.
how do
Hey,
you know
Eric,
that?
I got to get going. It was good seeing you guys. I wanted to stop in.
Yeah,
I don't like
bro.
that clock thing. I'll see you next month. Hey, how about the JJP always says the misdirection. You're not taking any misdirections into any cases. You got to think about that too.
In any direction.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll see you next month though.
All right.
Hey, good
All
to
right,
see you
Douglas.
guys.
I've showed you.
Later.
See you, Douglas.
Bye, man.
I've showed you guys
Bye.
the same thing in Charleston. Look, show me a better interpretation. That's what I'm saying is this is the best interpretation I've seen because no one else I've ever seen is showing this.
It's the time of the shadow. That's why it's shadow and dark down below. The top half of the puzzle is light. The bottom is dark. And what does the yin and yang symbol mean? Can you explain the yin and
Yes.
and yang symbol? You can't.
Well,
Sure.
yes.
I can.
It's light and dark.
So you
It's
have
good. It's good and evil. It's a training technique.
Right. And it's harmony.
It's used in martial arts. It's used in sports.
But
It's
how does it apply?
associated
How
to
does it
the
apply to the
Chinese,
Golden
correct?
Gate, to the bridge? How
It-
does it?
Well, I don't know if that's not absolutely necessary yet. An interpretation is first of all Chinese, right?
Right.
Yin and yang Chinese. This
Yep.
puzzle starts and ends at an arch. So I think that's probably what it is. The other component to this is the Presidio against GGP. So those are kind of sister parks in, so I really don't know, but clearly the main theme of that is Chinese. That's what he's trying to communicate.
And it's
Sure.
also harmony. And if you look at the face of the lady in the JJP's painting, there's different colors. There's red, there's dark, there's yellow, and to me, it's telling harmony of
Colors of the Giants.
various ethnic groups. And China, Nixon was the first president to go over to China, and he established relations with China.
Sure.
And so there's that aspect of race in this picture also, and harmony. And if you read about Pearl Buck, you're going to see it. She was an amazing person. There's a pearl in here. She could be representing Pearl Buck
Stretchy.
and China.
Eric, can you show this?
Well, if you take Mark Twain from the verse and connect him to the Chinese, he has major history with the Chinese people in San Francisco.
Yes.
And Mark Twain, he started his life on the Mississippi with the riverboats.
A steam riverboat, which you see it.
And then he was out on the East Coast. Then he went to the West Coast. So you got three aspects of
There's
which
a
Byron
million
used all
ways to
three
create Twain.
areas.
It's got to be something that happened in San Francisco, or else
Well,
it could be a million things.
The Chinese community in San Francisco asked Mark Twain to be their spokesman because of the ill treatment they were receiving. He told them, I'm not the person to do that for you. He thought it should have been somebody in their community, but they wanted to use his celebrity. So you
Eric,
have Mark Twain in the
this?
verse directly connected to the Chinese immigration. But that's the immigration that Byron already gives you. So
partly, why he, references Twain. Now there's a different interpretation along the path to get to the bridge, but nonetheless, so it's when you look at these clues, Twain, how many different angles is there to Mark Twain? 1 billion angles. So as a hunter, if you're using probabilities and logical reasoning, you have to find a way to narrow down the meaning of this clue. So if you're using, well, he's a riverboat guy and he liked gambling. Well, there's 1 billion things that, you know what I mean? So the high probability is something specific to San Francisco.
That you see.
Or else it's too broad.
What do you see at the starting point?
Right here, the ferry arch.
It's going to be something outside what you normally commonly know about Mark Twain.
There was a steamboat at Aquatic Bay. That was what you saw at the starting point. Yep.
Well, she's pointing to a 4, and she's pointing to 3 between the 3 and the 4. I interpret that as 43 and a half. Now, interestingly enough, that's a very famous pier in San Francisco. Pier 43 and a half. It's extremely famous, and it's odd. Do you know any other piers in America or the world at large where there's a half pier?
Yeah, but if somebody mentioned this pier and you would say, someone said, where is this? You would say San Francisco. There you go. City clue.
Okay,
that's all
but
if that is the connection, that's all it is.
The ferry's pointing to the 4 and the 3 and a half. So why would you waste that on just, well, hey, by the way, it's San Francisco. 43, it's so unique.
Well, you have to decipher if that means anything in the painting. You have to decipher the clues in the book to make to get a topic to make a determination of what that actually means.
It's such an oddball, interesting, historic thing. And by the way, she's pointing to 43 and a half. I'm just saying that the probability that that's the start is extraordinarily high because of how unique it is.
Okay, well, let's work backwards. Let's work backwards. Okay, so the image you have up there. So imagery to book that we know is 100%. You got Giants, San Francisco Giants. We got Mark Twain, and we got Chinese. What does this here have to do with any of that? Nothing. You could simply work backwards right there. Did Mark Twain have something? Did Mark Twain have something to do? Yeah, but this is what I'm talking about. There's other clues in the book that you got to use.
Why? If she's pointing to 43 and a half.
Is this the object of Mark Twain's attention?
Blocks. It's 8 blocks and 6 blocks. She's giving you directions. Look at her left hand. She's making an L with her fingers.
Let me ask you this. Left. Out in Kitty Hawk near Roanoke Island, can he really not include the Wright brothers in that puzzle? It's so interesting and unique.
They are part of that puzzle.
Right. So that's my point, is he can't be out there in Roanoke Island and not touch on something so historic and interesting as the Wright brothers. He has to find a way to work that in. He can't leave that out. Now, some people say, well, where does it say and the Wright brothers has to be included? Well, it doesn't say that. But if I logically reason out the importance of the first flight in human history and the way he's included various cool things of history, it would be an epic fail and epic miss to not include the Wright brothers in that somehow, even though they have nothing to do with Roanoke Island. So you can apply that filter very similarly to these other cities and really narrow it down.
He
So my
he
whole- my
uses the
whole
Wright
point-
brothers at the end as a viewpoint. But see, the Wright brothers.
But-
See, this is where you got to use the
He
history.
has to include it.
So the first
He has
flight
to.
was a German. That was Lilienthal, and Lilienthal worked with Octave, who is known as the father of aviation. Octave worked with the Wright brothers. They were inspired by Otto Lilienthal of Germany. He did the first glider flight, which killed him. They did the first powered flight, but he inspired them. But once
So,
again, with
right-
Allusion, you don't say Lilienthal.
Are you
He
guys
said
with me on this,
Octave,
though?
and you
Are
don't
you
say
with me on
Wright
this?
brothers.
You got to be, you got to get in this guy's head and look at what he's shown us. He's showing us
look at
highlights.
this. Look at this.
He's not showing us some little obscure park that nobody knows about.
But
He's showing
see,
us highlights.
In the painting, you see there's a baseball. Okay.
Maybe.
Curveball is mentioned in the book, and the curveball was created and invented during the Civil War
Where?
on Roanoke Island.
Okay, there you go. That makes sense, right? But I'm
now,
just saying.
Now you
big
got home
picture.
plate in Boston.
Big
You got
picture.
Sox in Boston. You got a baseball. You got the Negro League, which is the Chicago American Giants, which is another Giants. You got to take all those clues and put them together.
But,
And when I was doing all the baseball research, I'm like,
it's very
the team
low
spirit
odds that
talked
he
about a
leaves
curved
out-
ball.
It's
And
very
Mark-
low odds he
Mark.
leaves out these cool, unique, historic things that make a city what it is.
Mark, can you explain anything on the art on page 128 at the top that alibi elf?
What about it?
Can you explain any of that?
I don't need that.
Well, so
To
they
get to
just
the
drew
spot.
that as a fun thing that, the artist thought, I'm going to put this stuff in there and it'll be fun and kind of funny. And
Well, I
I'm gonna
think
put
these,
Daniel Webster and his nickname in there and the tricky
especially,
Dick Dixon and I'm going to
What
hold up
guarantees
the
this is-
eyeglasses.
what guarantees this is related to San Francisco? I told you in New York, Spirit of 76 and Wooly Bully have to be related to New York. Have to.
So if you look at the other
They
page,
are.
it was the Birdman of Alcatraz,
Okay.
which is Robert Stroud, and he's sitting there with a lawyer or somebody with some papers, and the verse is education and justice for all to see. Well, justice is Alcatraz. Education, Stroud was doing his own education with the birds. If you want to go near
So that clue related to Alcatraz, just for a second,
which is San Francisco.
It's
and
into
San Francisco is on page 128
it's
also.
into the verse, right?
It's-
That is
it's-
into
it's
the
the
verse.
verse
So it's not
and the images.
Alcatraz
That's
is
my
not the
point.
start.
It's the
Alcatraz is
images.
not the start. It's not the finish, clearly. So
Well, no,
it's a
it's not.
long
It's
along
an
the journey.
indicator of that.
It's
of
a
Alibi
city
Elf.
clue.
You have to match up Alibi Elf with San Francisco, or you're getting nowhere. He has to
Okay,
give you
I
clues
don't-
like
I
that.
don't
If you
disagree
go
with you on
to Milwaukee and it says Jefferson and
disagree with you on that,
Monticello,
Joe.
we know Monticello, Wisconsin is not where a cask is, but it puts you in Wisconsin. It's a state clue. The Alcatraz
these-
in that movie, just like Dirty Harry, Coit Tower, he's an inspector for the San Francisco Police Department. Those three movies were blockbusters in the 70s that all came out in the years prior to Byron doing research
Just
for the book.
related to this.
He's also illustrated in the book.
If this relates to San Francisco, and I don't doubt that, I don't like, especially the illustrations leave so much room for interpretation that they,
Right.
in and of themselves, are somewhat low probability. Let's say over a photograph of the skyline of New York City.
Well, see, that's where I'm trying to point out to you. These art drawings localize where the box is. They're not telling you it's in somewhere in San Francisco, and that's the end of it. They're telling you how many steps to take in which direction, and also referencing what. Is it a corner they're referencing? What is it referencing? A corner,
that
a 3,
imagery,
4, 5-foot triangle, 3 feet, which is a giant step, and you see the final spot is that.
Can you imagine how much effort it would take if all three of us, we decide to go out and make a treasure hunt, and we create this, and we ask all these people who don't really know where the box is to now create these illustrations that that's a very tall order to do that 12 times. I'm saying it's a low probability.
Right. But how
Not
long
that
did
it's
it-
impossible.
It's not that difficult.
It's not.
I would
and how
much
long did it
rather
take writing the
trust
book?
I would much rather trust the painting, because I know the painting is derived from photos taken at the box location. There's no debate on that. These, I don't know exactly what the intention was in these illustrations, but
Well,
I know the painting.
That's not what all the imagery.
I
in the,
know
in the
the
paintings
painting
are.
unequivocally relates to the box location and imagery at the box location.
Right.
You can't guarantee me that on these illustrations.
Yes, I can. If you're at the dig spot,
Who
you can.
Who
you
said
can,
that? Who said, we
I'm
use
saying
the
that.
illustrations?
It's like
at the place.
Oh, hang on. Let's take a step back real quick. It's here's an example. So we know Spanish immigration, St. Augustine. Why?
Hey
Because
guys,
they
I got a
founded it.
boogie. I'm sorry, I got a doctor's appointment. I got to roll. Sorry.
Okay.
All
All right,
right.
man.
All right. I'll see you soon.
Good seeing you.
All right,
Good.
man.
All right.
So the example I wanted to make of how Byron did this. So he used the British in Roanoke Island because it was their first attempt in the settlement. He used
And
the
he has a
Spanish
lot
in
of
St.
firsts.
Augustine.
Byron
he didn't-
points
He
out a
didn't
lot
do
of
that
firsts.
for every single puzzle. He didn't
Right.
use the founding immigration to every city.
Totally agree.
New York's Russian for a reason. Germany with Milwaukee is because of the socialism there, and the John Birch Society, which is listed as Indiana in the book, and them being the first major U.S. city to elect 3 socialist mayors. That's why he used Germany. The Germans, they immigrated to every damn city in the country, and so did all the ferries of the first voyage. Everybody was everywhere. You just got to pick. Basically, you got all 12 ferries in every single puzzle, plus others that came later. So you got to figure out which ones you need.
Right. And that's the hard part with the back of the book, is because there's so much information, so many interpretations. Right. And if you're not at a dig spot that is correct, it won't make any sense to you.
Yeah. That's
my point. And if you are at the dig spot and you start looking, like I'm looking for aces. First of all, I know it's San Francisco, and they tell you in the verse near ace is high. The second to the last line, to the place. That's word play to the ace. All you have to do is put PL in parentheses. To the ace, the cask is kept. So you're stepping from an ace to an ace. And that's what he's doing.
And you're exactly right with saying to the ace is where the cask is kept.
Yeah, and
see, so my interpretation of an ace is a baseball pitcher.
I understand that, but
see, Mark was talking about Battery Lancaster and like an ace fighter pilot.
Right.
I said, yeah,
that's where
that's also an ace.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it started off, we said there's multiple meaning. Words have multiple meanings. Like the airplanes flying around the Empire State Building on Corporate Giants. Those are aces. Ace is high. So he uses multiple meanings to a word, and that's part of the confusion of these puzzles.
In that imagery you're just talking about, that's supposed to be King Kong on top, the Empire State Building from the 1933 King Kong movie.
Right.
The airplane has EPA on the side of it. That's a clue.
Yes, it is, and I'll tell you why. If you look at the fat giant laying down, same thing. What happened in the 70s? They passed that law that increased the penalties that started, because San Francisco Bay, many of these bays were being polluted.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Industry. The industrial age.
Corporations were polluting.
Yeah. People don't realize we have a lot of this. Like you look at the YMCA for Montreal. It comes from England. The first location was in Boston in America and Montreal in Canada. But why did the YMCA form? You got to do this history. And the YMCA formed during the industrial age because all these young men, everybody went to work in the industries. They had money. They were going to the brothels. They were blowing their money gambling. YMCA stepped in. It was a religious organization, which it still is today. But it was like, hey, come here instead of going there. You know, we want to get you guys away from that environment. That was the founding of the YMCA. Every city they popped up in, and for religious reasons, they were trying to get these young men out of these places they shouldn't have been, that, you know, were considered evil, whatever. But when you chase the YMCA back, you go, if the YMCA was a person, you know, hey, I'm the YMCA. Where'd you come from? What's your immigration? What ferry are you descended of? They're an English ferry. And of course, Canada, and they're even the YMCA's migration from England over to Canada and the United States. So US, you got Boston, then New York.
See, that's
Montreal. We know these are 3 cities of the secret, and that's just the YMCA.
That's a problem with the bridge in San Francisco. That's not near Chinatown, not near any Chinese park or any kind of Chinese settlements. That's a problem.
Well,
that's a big
Mark mostly uses the page. Everybody's open to do on this page on Facebook. They can do whatever interpretation they want. I'm a book guy. Like Josh Gates said, he goes, read the book and go crazy. It reads like foreign stereo instructions.
I say gibberish.
And it doesn't make any sense. So what I had to do, you know, I've told people this before. I did about 6 months of research on Byron just to see how far this would go. And then I said, how do you create a book like this? What do you do? And I got another Facebook page for there's treasure out there. I've already looked through his book. This guy, John Collins Black, he uses the same techniques Byron uses.
Yeah,
I'm doing the
same puzzle. I know where you're at. We got to get together on that.
He uses imagery. He uses text, right. And people see, like Chuck, you were one of I made you a group expert because you understand the illusion.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to understand this. And it's, I can keep giving examples, but what it breaks down to, the illusion, it's a lot of research work for us readers that a lot of people don't want to do.
Right.
And I think this is why Byron closed down that back page of the book where he tells you tell me exactly and precisely how you got here. And then you tell me exactly and precisely, this is even if you're not able to go there.
Yeah.
You know, he says, I want to know exactly and precisely. People were sending these in, and then Byron just said, listen, I ain't taking these no more.
Yeah.
And from a lot of the posts I see today from 99% of the people, and it's nothing against them. This book is difficult. It's not easy. Byron said, oh my, he was like this, like nowhere even close. I think he understood. I feel like I got a good understanding of how he thinks, but it's not, you know, Mark said earlier, is it really hard to create a losing treasure hunt? I can go Blackbeard. Okay. Blackbeard is going to be, I'm going to pick Blackbeard and I'm going to bury it next to some monument by him in South Carolina. I'm sure they're all over the place. Now I'm never going to say Blackbeard. I'll mention pirates, the ocean. I'll go look up pirate terminology. I'll use Mark Twain's name because it's got something to do. Mark Twain is actually a measurement of depth.
You could say curly tar chin.
Yeah, I could say stuff in the. I could say stuff in the text like, John Orr, flipped his boat. So you got oar like a boat. I'm using boat, but I'm making that seem like it's some guy named John Orr that doesn't really exist. And then he drowned. So I got 3 water keywords in there: or, boat, drowning. Just to have people go later when they go, oh, pirates, or, water, drowning. That's how you hide it. But I'll never say Blackbeard. I might say mustache or something like that to kind of go, oh, mustache beard.
And here's a point too. He uses size differences. Like in the end of this, he says giant pole, giant step to the place the cask is kept. And it's talking about a giant pole. So everybody's thinking you got to find this really tall pole or whatever. Well, that's the Coit Tower. But he has small businessman linked to both San Francisco and New York. Now, why is that? Because the small businessman, to him, Coit Tower drinking fountain is a giant pole. And he's starting out an ace. If you look at the base of the drinking fountain, a picture, and I have that, I was going to put it up, but I'm having technical difficulties. If you look at it, is a concrete that looks like the top of a cube of if you'd roll a die of a dice, it looks like a die, a dot with a square around it. That's an ace. That's the ace we were looking for on the ground. And you take a step from that out to the cask. And it's a giant step because it's 3 feet. And also, if you look at the eye on tax burden, the one eye, there's 2 eyes. One eyeball of the little guy with the bag on him is looking up at the eye on the bag. And if you turn it a little bit sideways, you can see that the shadow of a drinking fountain. It's like a bowl on top, connected, and then a bottom part. And I've posted that before. And right where you step on the pedal to get the water, there's a 5. Now that 5 isn't there just, artists thought, well, it'd be funny to put a 5 in right here. No, that has meaning. And that, Mark was talking about probabilities. What's the probability of that 5 being there without any kind of meaning? And you see 3s and 5s all over the place. And you see 3, 4, and 5 in many places. And a lot of times they're connected to both New York and San Francisco. The billiards the billiards picture with Elvis, I believe it is, has numbers on the ball, number 1 and number 12 that you can see. What's he telling you? He's telling you the puzzle that goes with puzzle number 1 and puzzle number 12. What are those? San Francisco and New York. And what's important in billiards or pool? Angles. What's a right angle? Right triangle. What is a right triangle? A 3, 4, 5 triangle. So he's telling us some information. Here's one that people...
And that's where you specifically could see the Greek fairy in any puzzle.
Right.
You start seeing the angles and all that stuff that are in a painting.
And let me also point out, if you look closely at Mr. Ben Ason's photographs and you look at the ones in the book, sometimes they're different. Why are they different? The one with the pool, there's a lot of smoke or dark up above. It's not so in the picture that you can get from, or photograph, from Ben. Why is it different? Well, in the smoke up above, you're going to find, I think, some numbers, 3 and 5. These were the old-fashioned days of photoshopping where they can add things. They changed those photographs. And if you look at the photographs and you figure out the change and they fit to a theory, I don't want to use the word solve. If they fit to a theory, guess what? You might be right. So I'm throwing that stuff out because people don't look close enough. Some people said, well, you don't need a magnifying glass.
It's like, simple stuff like this.
Right.
See the money bag.
Right. And
I ain't going to show that long. But if you flip to another story, so with this one, you got high interest and then you got taxes. You don't think, everybody should realize these go together.
Absolutely.
So if you have this, I have this story listed.
Yeah. Look at the art. Look at the art right on that bag. Look at the loophole in the bottom right of that drawing. And also
there's coins in the toll troll.
Yeah.
Coins, money bag. Right.
So these, I was showing before, and I think you'll probably agree to me. This thing, the whole entire thing is like a spider web with nodes. Yeah. And the nodes would be the fair folk. And some of those are related to each other. And if you get enough that are related and you figure the connections, in the center is where you want to be. That's where you get enough, and that's where Mark was talking about probabilities. If you get enough clues and they're making sense, guess what? Your probability goes way up.
Yeah.
And so if you get a bunch of connections and they're going to the center in the same spot, that's where your cask is.
Yeah. Well, this story here, I think on the last I think Charleston podcast, I talked about this.
All
So so anybody that's just joining and wants to get an idea how to wrap their minds around this book.
No.
So Charleston, we know that's the African puzzle. But when you go to the back of the book, it starts out as Russian. Okay, so where's the Russian ferry? New York. There's your first connection.
Bingo.
So we know because South Carolina, in Charleston's the city, the Devil Dogs, it says South Carolina. It's the only story that says South Carolina. So that's Charleston. We know it's African too, even though it might not say it. But when it says it's Russian, well, where's the Russian ferry? New York. So you go through Devil Dogs. Second Russian story is the tax burden. And I have this listed. There's clues in this story for San Francisco, New York, and Charleston. And you see April 15th. April, that's the month of Charleston. That's also tax day. This story right here, I don't even want to break it down, but there's someone that has to do with taxes in Charleston. This story points right to them and the park they're in. Big Bites, IRS. You see that in the painting. Orphans, that's part of the Charleston painting. Orphans and kids. Armaments. Gold. You see the mention of gold. That's going to be San Francisco.
See, you're doing exactly what I did. I went through looking for keywords. And the keywords, if they connect from one puzzle to another, they're again, probability. I don't want to go down the probability.
Right.
It's likely
simple keywords like that.
Yeah.
Part of the reason Mark Twain went out to California was to get into the gold and silver rush.
Right.
Plus, we know the history. That's why most people migrated to the West.
And
massive part of history. Massive part of history.
And you know the story of the jumping frog of Calaveras County? You know what the frog name was? Daniel Webster. What's in the San Francisco? A black Daniel Webster.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, maybe, but maybe that is a connection. It's just one of many, and you can just keep going.
But as you keep going, though, you got to mark them. So you got to mark. What I use is I use a different color highlighter for whatever puzzle. But like when you hit the history, it says a specter is haunting Europe. The West Ghost. Ghost specter.
Yeah.
And then it says a specter of communism. So you're looking at some communism stuff out there in California too. And then it says an equally terrifying specter haunts America, the tax burden. So references like that, ghost specter.
Here, I'll give you some more.
Then it says Russian order. Then it says IRS, Seward's Folly.
Yep.
Now, you know this is a Charleston story because if the first one's Russian, you go, I got to go find a second. But both these stories are also New York because that's the Russian ferry story.
Exactly.
And all you have to do is pull all these little pieces. I mean, I found that story yesterday, the one that says gobbledygook and stuff. I was like, that's what most of this stuff is. It'll say fairies, blah, blah, blah. They play with maple syrup. It doesn't have anything to do with anything.
That's why the book failed to be a success, I believe, nobody understood what was going on in the back of the book.
Byron made this book for a specific amount of people, and they didn't buy it.
Right, yeah.
They did not buy it.
Let's go to
the easy ones were found.
You mentioned West Coast. That's one of my West Coast. That's one of my favorite because you read through that. What is it really about? And you read through it, you read about oil, smoke, water. And these things are, quote, shape shifters. Their shapes shift. What is the art? What do you see? You see something that like, a steam or a cloud. It shifts. It's shape shifter. So what else shapes? You have smoke. What is in corporate giants? There's clouds of smoke. So you can use shapeshifter as a node, and you can start connecting things. And then you look in the shapeshifters to see if there's any clues. And I'll give you one that nobody's mentioned before. And I shouldn't probably be mentioning this one. If you look closely, you'll see a heart in the smoke. In many other puzzles, you'll see a heart. What was the motto of New York for tourism back in the 70s that was so popular, and you still see it and sometimes hear it today? I love New York. And it's a red heart. So if you find those hearts, you're probably looking at maybe, if you're right, those can be related to New York. And those are the kind of things Byron built.
One of the New York stories, and see, here's a big part of the secret. You look in the back of the book on 221, 222, you'll see a bunch of stories that list states that we know don't contain the city of the cask. But that story, all you got to do is look through it and find the keywords to figure out which story it does connect to, because they're offshoot stories. It's like if I did a story about Jefferson in Monticello, but I did the main part of the story about him being president, and I said Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. And then there's a story in there that ain't listed to his birth state or anything else, but I just say Oregon. But you go in there and you see Monticello, and that gives you the keyword to go, oh, this is connected to him, but was in Wisconsin. So this was after he was president of the United States.
Okay. Yep.
And that's where I'm hiding the clues to where you really need to be. Not Washington, D.C. is listed a lot in this book, but it's usually because of events and presidents. But don't go downtown D.C. with a damn shovel like people told me. I think this is by the Lincoln. Good, go down there.
You mean like
shovel.
The right wing, left wing trog?
Yeah. Go down there in front of the Capitol with a shovel and start digging in the bushes and find out what happens.
There's a reason why, but I can't go into that because New York is like we're still on that. I probably won't be able to dig for a while, but hopefully my grandson will pick up some digging there because I think we're really close there. But you're right on the history. If you look at Robert Stroud, the Birdman, and what happened to him, and how many times he was tricked and lied to, and what the theme of that is, alibi elf is coming with excuses and lies. Well, that was Tricky Dick. If he got that nickname back in 1950, and I didn't realize that. I thought it was from the Watergate or something else. But you start looking at the history, you can pick up on a lot of stuff. And if a lot of it fits, the more things that fit, the higher probability, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, stuff Mark was talking about, like, okay, you see this ferry. When he talks about they're looking at stuff, well, they're on a car. He's down there looking at the wheel. There's a wheel in the Milwaukee painting. So when you break down the American Motor Gremlins, you figure out that this is the American Motor Car Company, and they made the AMC Gremlin. That puts you right in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Okay. Even though this story, I just looked it up and I totally forgot it. Even though this story lists area concentration as Michigan, because that's where the automakers were.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Native American, because AMC was an American created company. They weren't like Mercedes, which was Germany, or BMW that was British.
Yeah.
That's why I've been telling people. People see Native American in the back of the book. It's like, it's not the indigenous tribes people. Byron tells you in the front of the book, it says the fairies were not naive enough to call them Native Americans.
Okay. Well, see,
so when it says Native Americans, it means something that happened in America, like baseball.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought
the Manhattan Project.
I'm glad you brought that image and that puzzle up, because I couldn't make heads or tails out of that, because I haven't worked on the Milwaukee puzzle hardly at all.
That was one of the first ones where I said, well, I said, okay, so there's like, what else is in there? Milwaukee. What are the paintings? I have that. I mean, a few do, but some in the book, it's like, this says Alberta, Canada. This says New Mexico. This you're like, there ain't nothing in New Mexico.
No.
Yeah, there's something in one of the puzzles of the secret that connects to New Mexico.
Yeah.
You just got to figure it. Once you figure out that topic, it's easy to. And if you take, another thing Mark was talking about, if you look at look at the stuff for what it is. We have Mark Twain. We show imagery, even in the team spirit. So he used, I was talking to Ben Ace on the phone yesterday. So they got Monty Irvin to come to Byron's apartment. But if he told me if they couldn't get Monty Irvin, they were going to get this other guy.
Okay.
So Monty Irvin actually showed up. The thing in that photo is Monty Irvin, they retired his jersey as a New York Giant in San Francisco. He never actually played for them.
Perfect clue.
The guy on the poster behind him that Byron hung on the wall, and Ben told me that Byron wasn't a big baseball fan, so Byron went out and got this poster. Willie Mays, who just died last year, to this day, he's still the most popular player in San Francisco Giants history. He also played for the New York Giants, and Monty Irvin and Willie Mays both played in the Negro Baseball League. Now, when you take those two players of the Negro League that made that transition to white baseball, Jackie Robinson, who everybody's heard of, and Willie Mays was the other. Jackie Robinson, he just got more fame over it. And Jackie Robinson, what I read, him and Willie Mays didn't really like each other. But then you have Rubes Foster. Rubes is mentioned in the book for one of the Chicago puzzles. And that's it's got the big black giant guy because he started the Negro Baseball League in Chicago, and they were called the Chicago American Giants. That was the team's name. And that's why there's a big black man with a little house. Another Giants reference, but it's another reference to baseball.
Well, yeah, and you know what? If you look at that, and I believe he's got his heel there and a big leg coming up from that house, right? And he's a giant, but a leg is 3 feet. The average length of a leg is 3 feet. And in that drawing, it has a leg and it has the heel at home. Now, what does he say in the verse? Feel at home. You see the wordplay, feel at home. He's got a heel at home. He's telling you, he's showing you the localization. It's 3 feet from home plate.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of crap.
That right there to me, if you look in the shadow on his leg.
There's Rubes. Rubes is mentioned right there.
Look at the shadow on the Giants. Look at the shadow. Yeah. Look at the shadow on the Giants' leg. It looks like a baseball player at bat.
And that is Rubes Foster. That's just a caricature of him. But he's definitely a giant.
So,
but you see how easy the Chicago painting is. It literally tells you Chicago, the Chicago World's Fair.
Yeah.
You know, this is like you were talking about at the beginning of the story, the American Motor Gremlins, the American Motor Car Company, and their car, the Gremlin. Byron stuck it all together.
Yeah. See, Byron had to give you enough information to figure out which fairy is which puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple. Look, here's another baseball cap.
Right.
You know, it's like.
Well, it's the San Francisco. That's why he gives you the Birdman of Alcatraz. That's San Francisco.
And there's so many in this story. There's so many keywords.
Yeah.
But this story is also for New York. It says the Chicago World's Fair, a Cubs loving helpless giant. So the Chicago Cubs, there's allusion to the Cubs. Then it says jazz giants. So when you look up the history of jazz, a lot of people go, New Orleans. No, jazz really started it's ubiquitous in the book because it's everywhere, but it started in Chicago as well. Giant, there's how many times giant is mentioned in this? Giant, that's how it connects to New York. That's how it connects to San Francisco. It says the Chicago World's Fair, a hulking, towering, powerful, muscled giant, hog butcher, tool maker, stacker of wheat with a titanic inferiority complex. Windswept, Lake Michigan. Prohibition. There's another clue to Chicago's. That's the Prohibition Gin. Yeah, I mean, these are just Chicago. Yeah, these are all clues to Chicago, and there's Chicago right there, which I even marked right there, city. So this is why Chicago was the easiest puzzle. But with Chicago, we know in the end it's Grant and Lincoln, Civil War, Grant Park. This right here, the Jazz, that's another level of the Chicago puzzle. If you've never been to Chicago, the Negro Baseball League, when you figured out Rubes Foster, he founded all that in Chicago. Does that lead anywhere? No. The black is also connected to slavery, to Civil War. That's the main focus. You have the expeditions of 1893, 1934 mentioned, Democratic Convention of 68. All these things are just pointing to Chicago. Seen from the West, here we're going with out to California. Machine gun and fiddle case, and then from the east, so there's west and east. That's San Francisco. That's New York.
Yeah.
Skyscrapers, which connects Houston to Chicago, to the gray giants of Manhattan, New York. That's a split off right there. And then it said, then right after that, it says, with hay in his hair and skyscrapers for playthings, the mortals who live in his mammoth shadow. There's shadow, keyword for New York. Giant, giant, giant. Then when you get to the history, when it says Poland, Ireland, Africa, these were the three countries. It wasn't just black guys trying to get into Major League Baseball. It was also if they were Jewish, if they were Polish, if they were Irish. The league didn't want them. A lot of people in the stands are like, we don't want to see no damn Irishman or some Polish guy out there playing baseball. They wanted white boy Americans out there.
It was pretty goofy times back then.
No, it was, Byron teaches that lesson in this book. Today we go, oh yeah, the way African slaves were treated. It wasn't just them. It wasn't that. I mean, we had indigenous tribes people in this country that were slave owners. Blacks were slave owners. Yeah. A lot of people came to this country with that American dream, which is just total bullshit. It's white pig. It is. Immigrants came to this country going, oh, I'll make a new life here, and just found out they just got hosed.
Yeah.
The ghettos, the slums they lived in. They're like, but they didn't have any money to go back.
Yeah.
So they had to make a life here. But a lot of people that were fleeing Europe were, for religious reasons, or like the Irish, Scottish people fleeing because of like the potato famine. Yeah. They had a reason to get out of where czars, dictators, whatever. Yeah. But a lot of people just said, hey, have you seen that Kevin Costner movie? It kind of flopped at the theater, but in that movie, there's a guy in New York, and I can't even remember the name of the damn movie. But in that movie,
if it was Kevin Costner, I probably didn't see it.
It came out in the theaters last year.
Well, it doesn't.
It was supposed to be like a 3-parter.
He's the same in all the movies. He's the same, kind of expressionless, monotone. I'm sorry, Kevin. Sorry. Except he was perfect in Dances with Wolves. But anyway.
Yeah, I was actually watching that earlier. But there's a scene in there where there's a guy in the very beginning. This guy and his son they're laying stakes. They're planting roots.
Okay.
And the Indians come up and kill the shit out of them. I mean, just slaughter them. And then there's another group that comes, and the army shows up, and they're like, "Hey, man, why don't you stay closer to that so you got some protection?" And the guy goes, and they'd already been attacked by the natives, and a bunch of people had been killed. And he goes, "Didn't you talk to the people that were here before?" And the guy looks across the river, and there's 2 crosses. Whoop. And he's like, "No, we never got a chance to talk to him." But at the end of the movie, it shows a printing press guy in New York, and he's printing out the name of that place where everybody's getting killed.
Oh,
and it's going, great deals on the land. It's right in the middle of Indian territory.
Low cost. Free land.
Yeah. And the guy says to him, like, I think he says something like, "Man, aren't you getting a little, he knows these people aren't coming back. He knows they're going to get slaughtered." So it's like, so that's how it ended. And the sequel never came out because the first one flopped because Kim Kardashian wasn't in it. So nobody wanted to go see it. But that was happening to a lot of, Mark says, I don't think Byron would use the Manhattan Project and us killing millions of Japanese by dropping atomic bombs. And people told me before, he would never use Nazi Germany because he's a Jew. Yeah, he would. Guy's a history teacher. The history is important. We learn from our mistakes of the past. That's why the Holocaust and all that stuff is important.
Yeah, well,
for everybody to remember.
I like a lot of the stuff Mark says, and I agree with some of it. But when he says that Byron would this or Byron wouldn't that, how does he know that? I mean,
nobody does. Nobody does.
Nobody does. It's like me saying, well, Byron said this or thought that, except for I actually believe the whole story on how the book came about. If you read actually what the reporter reported that Byron said, he said, like the back of the book, you don't need the back of the book to solve the puzzle. He didn't say it didn't matter. You see the difference?
Yeah. See, I did research on that. You know what the actual back of the book is?
Oh, well, yeah, that too. I've seen that.
It's not any of these pages. It's this page.
I've seen that argument also, and I'm okay with that.
He also said it's easy. It's not.
Right. And
it's not.
And I know for a fact that a writer or editor would not put a book together that has a whole bunch of gibberish and garbage and weird stuff in the back that has no relation to the front. He would tie them together. He would make the back relevant to the front of the book.
Yeah. Well, this is another thing with that. That's always, people go, okay, well, he took this book. The publisher said there's not enough pages. People are assuming those were all added to the back.
Not all to the back. There's some to the front.
They could have been mixed together.
Sure.
I mean, they not necessarily, they went, oh, the book was this then they added all this. No. Yeah. I don't think, if we, basically Byron has left, this Allusion treasure hunt is Byron picks a spot. He picked Charleston. He picked New York, San Francisco, Milwaukee, right. Montreal, St. Augustine. Some of them we know why. Founding, first immigration.
First, there's a lot of firsts in the book. Yep, first across.
Exactly. And then he picked a spot. And that's exactly how you do this. If I had to go do one of these today, I have to go pick a spot. Yeah. I have to go bury it. Then I have to work backwards. But when Byron starts to come across people of history, famous people, he's not using information that's commonly known. That's one thing. That's why in Milwaukee, it gets into Abraham Lincoln he hides the fact that puzzle's really about Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
And poet Robert Burns, the Scottish poet's influence on his life. Chicago at the end is about the relationship between Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses Grant. And the back of the book, one of the stories for Chicago says the North, that's alluding to the Union. So there's another side to the Civil War. So that's another puzzle. There's a lot of allusion to, like, I thought it was at the Ben Franklin statue in New Orleans, but that's just everybody searched that area. There's nothing there. So everything else in that Lafayette Square needs to be found in the book because something there is being alluded to. Ben Franklin gets you to that spot in the park, and I found that out to be the case in Charleston too. Just because you go, it leads to this monument, but you dig around it and you go, I'm not finding nothing.
Yeah.
Because you got to turn around, and JJP said when you get to the park, you need to kind of look around.
Exactly.
Because you get here, like, say the American Motor Gremlins. I get to this park and I go, AMC, what here's car related? There's a memorial to say Daimler Chrysler or Carl Benz, which is the German part. Dig all around that statue and go, shit, nothing.
Yeah.
So then you got to start, what else is in this park that's automobile related? Or, hey, who's this guy? He's blah, 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 blah. Let me see if I can find him in the book. It ain't going to say his name, but like we were doing earlier with the gavel and stuff, you can say, oh, he's a lawyer. So you start looking in the page at Alibi Elf. Hey, where gavels are.
In the San Francisco puzzle, it says, first across. Let me see. Where is that?
Yeah, those are
running north, but first across. And he's using
Exactly.
he's using that two different ways, or maybe even three, because across Aquatic Bay, you see the 3 post, you see the Mark Twain, I'm calling it, you see a steamship or paddle wheel. This is what used to be there, not now. And then beyond that, what do you see? You see Coit Tower. You follow the art, the JJP's art, and she gives you the directions, 6 blocks and 8 blocks. You go left, you go down, and you put you Telegraph Hill. Then you go north, and what do you see up there? You see who was first across, Columbus. There used to be Columbus statue up there in front of Coit Tower. It's gone now. People have dug all around that. I don't know about all around that, but they were digging around that statue thinking, oh, this is it, because of the Columbus first across clue.
Yeah.
But like you said, you have to look around. That wasn't the end. It continues on. It says, is an object of Twain's attention, giant pole, giant step. Well, another thing that was Twain's attention is Lily Coit. She was alive. He was alive. He knew what he wrote about her. Mm-hmm. Giant pole. It's right there in front of you. It's Coit Tower. What's at the top? There's little holes that look like aces.
That's wasn't that the tower that was used in the Dirty Harry movie?
It might have been.
Isn't that where Dirty Harry tries to deliver the money to the bad guy and gets the crap beat out of him?
I know what you're talking about. I'm gonna have to go back and watch the movie, but it could be. Now, Dirty Harry's also featured in the art in Job Goblin. And here's the interesting thing with that. If you look at Job Goblin, you look at a poster from 1930 something with, I think it was Brandon, the famous actor. It's on the waterfront is the name of the movie, something like that. That image, if you look at those are matched up. People with down there, looks like they're rioting. And if you think about the history, like you were talking about, what happened in the 30s, there was rioting, there was a union battle, there was union battles. And what is Job Goblin about? It's about unions.
Yeah,
in the 1930s. If you start looking at 1930s unions, what's inside Coit Tower? There's murals from the 30s. They did them in the 30s, and they're about labor. What's Job Goblin about? It's about labor. You start looking at all these are interconnecting clues that are contributing to each other. They're reinforcing each other. And as Marx was saying, I would use the probability goes up that these are telling you something. And the top of the elevator in Coit Tower, if you look at that picture, you turn it sideways and it looks like the West Ghost. Is that a coincidence?
And yeah, people will make a lot of. I've been to a few cities, but the cities I visited the most have been St. Augustine and Charleston. And I've been there multiple times just to go, there's no place to dig there.
Yeah.
And I was always calling my buddy Jason. He's like, you find? I said, no, dude, I missed something. Yeah. And I had to dig. It's like with John Collins Black's new book, he tells you, and he's also done a video giving you instructions like Byron did in the back about dangerous spots. And you ain't got to climb the cliffs and traverse across a river rapid and stuff like that.
Don't get injured.
he tells you to read the book. And then he says, now go back and read it again because you missed something.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the people that are new to the secret hunt. These verses they're so vague.
Right.
You got to have, if I said yellow 5 and that was a verse clue to something and you got into the book and realized that I was talking about a Coca-Cola and then you realized that yellow 5 was an ingredient to that Coke and that's where you needed to be focusing or on some kind of food, that's when you would look and go, oh, I see, there's yellow and there's 5. Because you got into the ingredients, the secret formula or whatever, or the 11 herbs and spices, and you realized, oh, God, this is about Kentucky Fried Chicken. Yet nothing looks like Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah.
That's the illusion.
Yeah.
You're looking at something that doesn't immediately pop out to you and go, Oh, that's that.
Yep.
That's a reason. Like, Mark would like, why wouldn't he use the Golden Gate Bridge because it's so iconic? I said, well, it wouldn't require. It would require you. It would allow you to skip steps because you look at the painting and go, "That's the Golden Gate Bridge. That's San Francisco. I don't need to be in L.A."
Yeah.
Whatever the book heavily favors on, because when you go out there, it's basically it's the movement of two teams. But if you don't figure that out, you see a lot of crap for L.A. and a lot of the stuff for San Francisco is hidden.
Yeah.
So if you go out there and you see all this stuff, there it's talking about movies and music. You're not going to San Francisco for that in California. Los Angeles.
Sure.
So the secret, you got starts with an A, illusion, hiding the clues, but you also have a lot of illusion.
Well,
which is trickery. He's making you search music and stuff, and the whole time he's going, that's not where you need to be. But you're going, no. Yeah, I know it's these two cities, but music, I'm not going to San Francisco.
Yeah. I'll tell you what.
When he uses a verse like Stonewall, which is directly connected to the Stonewall riots, you can even search it on Google today. That's the main thing that's going to pop up. And you're like, gay stuff? Byron's good. Yeah, this happened. This was police in New York City raiding a gay bar that started a riot because this was just, they weren't doing anything wrong from what I read. It was just an attack by people that didn't like the gay community. Now, this led to riots in other countries, but San Francisco had its own Stonewall event. And with the baseball, there's a gay connection on my end when I go to the end. I searched that the other day, and I'm like, wait, with the Stonewalls, is there something? There was even some gay stuff connected to Mark Twain. If you dig deep enough in the history, they said, because I remember someone said, one of the objects of his attention was young women. I said, well, it just wasn't just women.
Yeah.
He got this reputation where rumors started about him.
Oh, okay.
While these young girls living with Mark Twain are not.
Yeah, I saw some of the writings on young girls, but
yeah.
But
it's like when you dig deep enough into Benjamin Franklin as part of New Orleans puzzle.
Oh, and Benjamin Franklin he was everywhere. He did a lot of things.
Yeah, the sex life of Abraham Lincoln, what you did not learn in high school.
Yeah,
but when it says gnomes admire, which I think references men, because men admired the hell out of Abraham Lincoln. He was like the Brad Pitt super celebrity of his day, and fays, women. Yeah, they delighted in him. So
I tell you, if anybody can actually get that Charleston's puzzle figured out, my hat's off. I think that's one of the hardest ones for several reasons. One is because of the hurricane damage and the man-made changes. And I had several areas of interest when I was looking and trying to figure that out. And actually, I had Patriots Point on there, which is where Mark thinks it is. But I just couldn't get enough, what I call evidence or connections to Patriots Point. And then I couldn't narrow it down. And I've told Mark this, you have a dig area. You don't have a dig spot. He's out there with the GPR, right? Yeah. That work that he did and the effort he put into it, my hat's off. I give him a lot of credit for doing that. Most people don't do that. So good on him for doing that.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, he took the time to go back and he got permission from everybody.
Yeah.
And they were all excited.
Yep.
As well. But
I also had there was a waterside park just across from there. And there was a lot of historical stuff that happened there where the slaves came in and some of the structures, White House and I think one was a tax a thing looks like an actual kind of a White House, the White House. It kind of looks like that. And it was a White House, maybe designed by White. There was an architect called White. So there were a lot of little things. And I don't remember all of them, but there were a lot of different clues. that would lead you over there, but the area had changed. The city changed it all up. That the cruise lines would pull in right at that pier, and they changed that whole area up. There was a pineapple fountain, or there's one there now, or something. So if it was there, it's probably gone. If the White Point Garden, I can see why people think that, and why all the clues were kind of. But I'm like, nah, I don't know about that. That's just something. But it could have been. It could be. It might still be there. I don't know.
White Point. There's something in there that Byron intended you to visit. It's that's the one puzzle I don't give any. I have everything at that park. The ending of that is no one's going to believe. So I don't even bother to tell anybody. But
well, do you think the capstan the lion's nose looks like a capstan?
No,
I think no way.
No.
I was in the Navy.
There's
not a capstan.
Even with John Palancar, he would have used something. It's got the holes in it. He would have used something like that. The damn nose looks more like a chalice. There's a lot. The thing is about Charleston. Oh my God. So I got to watch how I word this. Charleston.
You get hate mail.
Charleston is very, very deep in the research. But once you get to the point where I went, oh crap. I just took the long road on this. It's pretty much, I got to watch how I say this.
Take your time.
It's like I said earlier. I went, oh my God, why did I just do all this research? And Charleston was the first place that I figured out that I got to two parks with two similar statues. Because the other mark on here, he doesn't think you require a statue. I was like, yeah, Byron's got to give you a reference point. That's why he
has to have a reference point. Exactly right.
That's why we have times and day and night and the puzzles and direction, north, south, east, west. Those mean something most of the time more, like in the Houston puzzle. Fortress North, Friendship South, North and South, the Civil War. Right. The blue, the gray, North and South, Union Confederacy.
I think I know a little bit of why you're being careful, because I was actually looking in some of those areas that you were alluding to. Let's leave it at that, where there was, the illegal place down there, and there's symbols there's something on the walls, and there's a little park and a little circle, and there's a statue that changed. So I kind of get the idea.
It led. I'll tell everybody this. William Hirsch, who's a Jew, and he was born and died in Charleston. He's a huge part of that puzzle. But the thing is, he's a sculptor. Joe Ellen would have known who he was. But he's got, you look at a lot of his sculptures, they're black women with kids. Women and kids are a big part of that. You look at the Screaming Mimi with the baby in the basket. That's part of it. Okay. You look at a lot of the things in the puzzle that have the horns. The Screaming Mimi, the Devil Dog, they're all connected. And if they're Russian or anything like that. But he's got like 29 statues in different parks all over Charleston. But confirmers, like I said earlier on this podcast, I came back and I went, oh my God, I went the long way. Yep. So I said, are there other clues that I found way down the road that if I'd have found back then? But the thing is, I didn't realize it. And I said, there's the address. And in the book is the park name. And I specifically searched for that.
Okay.
And I said, wait, this park, what is the address?
Yeah.
I said, is he hiding an address in here somewhere? Yeah. Part of that address is in the painting. Yeah. Part of it's in the book. The book stories for Charleston. And I went, damn it. That is ridiculous. And there's a part of the address is in a story, which I'll tell everybody. Oh, no, I can't say that. Woo, I almost said that.
Yeah,
there's a connecting puzzle besides Houston that has the street is in the damn verse. I'll give everybody that.
Well, you're doing the same thing. I'm dancing around in New York because I don't want to give away stuff. But in Charleston, I looked at, I think it's Marion Square or the Citadel or whatever, because there's the Knights of Columbus that was or is down there. There was a whole bunch of stuff. There used to be a water fountain. They moved some stuff around. Some things were different. But I thought, man, that has a bunch of connections that it's possible there too. That's why I say Charleston, I think, is one of the
Citadel's at Hampton Park, and that was one of the that was the main hangout area back in the early days of Charleston. Everybody was at Hampton. There was so much stuff that was at Hampton Park. There was a Washington race park. It was the oldest horse racing track in the country, and it shut down for the Revolutionary War because they needed the damn horses.
And there was something about after the war and a parade or something. There's so much different history there that I was like,
stuff.
I was pulling my hair out and said, you know what? I'm never going to figure out Charleston.
Yeah, well, there's something when we get off here. There's something I'm going to discuss with you. I ain't going to make this announcement to everybody yet, but something in the secret world might be coming real good here real soon. So,
well, great. Yeah,
if it happens, but yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff like the Edward. Somebody I was talking on the phone last night. They were like, they saw what I said about Edward and Edwina named after him.
Yeah, yeah.
And everybody's Edward Halston. I'm like, yeah, but it says named after him. You're looking for somebody. So when you're looking for that immigration, plus we know John Wilkes Booth, and all that stuff. Abraham Lincoln's part of the Charleston puzzle was along with the Battle of Fort Sumter and William Seward of Seward's Folly. They all fall right into the history of this.
And there was a funeral home or something out. I was kind of like, what is up with that? Is that connecting? I was like, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the synagogue out there, the orphanage, the Charleston churches, dance, the Charleston candy bar, the Charleston candy bar actually has to do with the theater. Okay. And Edward and Edwina, see, I told this guy, I said, okay, I practiced this for so long. So John Wilkes Booth's father was Brutus Booth. He lived in London. He was married. He already had one son. He was a stage actor. Back then, these two guys were like the Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise of the day.
They were brother actors. Yeah.
It was Brutus Booth and it was Edwin Forrest. Edwin Forrest was the most famous actor. Brutus Booth was the second. Brutus Booth leaves London with his, I don't know if she was the nanny or he leaves his wife and his one son and immigrates to America and lands in Charleston.
Okay.
That's when the Booths, if you follow John Wilkes Booth all the way back, they got to Charleston first before they left and went up to New York City.
All right.
So after he got here with his mistress or whoever, Brutus Booth had a son that he named Edwin. Edwin was named after Edwin Forrest.
Oh.
And Edwin Forrest and Brutus Booth were best friends. And they were all working in the theater. Okay. Now, when you take the theater also, there was a guy in San Francisco that was a theater actor. I can't remember his name. He fell off stage, broke his leg, came back to the East Coast up in the Northeast, got into the candy bar making business. This was back when everybody was doing that. All the modern candy bars that you see at the store. He named it something else, but when the Charleston dance craze took off in Charleston, South Carolina, he changed the name of the candy bar to the Charleston. It'd be like today if I created a big candy bar called the Eric Bar and then said, oh, man, I'm just going to call it the Taylor Swift Bar. So everybody starts buying it because Taylor Swift is so popular. That's what he did, and the candy bar exploded, but he was also a stage actor. So Edwin Booth, when he had a daughter, he named her Edwina after Edwin Forrest. Oh. So Edwin Forrest and his daughter Edwina were both named after Edwin Forrest, the actor. And that's a direct connection. But what Byron wanted you to find was Charleston's African. What's that second immigration you need? The Booths came from England to here. Okay. Washington, he was an Englishman. The Battle of Fort Sumter, the first shots fired, was a Native American thing, but Abraham Lincoln was president, and he's also of English descent. Boom, boom, boom. There's your second fairy. you need.
Oh, okay.
So that's when you take it to Chicago. Grant was the Irish. He was the Scotsman. I mean, years ago when I told Rob Warwell, he thought that was the Irish emerald. I said, no, that's not. Grant was a Scotsman. But he's also an Irishman, but he was a Scotsman. He said he was a Scotsman. So you got the Scottish fairies emerald, not the Irish. The Irish got the ruby, and they're in Houston. You got to use the immigration.
Yeah, you have to have immigration.
Everybody's like,
a part. Yeah.
I said the fairies do everything in twos or pairs. Byron says that in the book.
Yep.
So twos means Byron gives you one, so twos would be two, or pairs. The hardest puzzles are we know what the three easiest ones are. So it's Charleston, in my opinion, because of the imagery that's in your face, Cleveland, and then Boston was that's 1, 2, 3. Easiest, Chicago, Cleveland, Boston. The hardest are New York, and second hardest is Milwaukee. Because Milwaukee, you need two pairs, but the second pair you need are hidden. The Irish Scottish fairy are always together in the secret world.
Yeah.
If you come to something and you go, this is Irish, because the book says they traveled together because they were so closely related.
Yeah. Well, I would disagree a little bit on the hardest, because I think the Roanoke, I call it the Roanoke, or the Wright Brothers Monument or Roanoke puzzle. I think to me, that's the hardest, because there is so much going on in the art, which is incredible, and I love it. And to me,
it's my favorite painting.
There's many good theories on that puzzle.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it's British. Byron gives you the British. The other you need is German. It's the same as St. Augustine. Paul Green's of German descent. Otto Lilienthal. The Wright brothers are out of it. They're Native American history. But the flight is German, just like Otto Lilienthal was the first to fly. He was German. The guy that invented the automobile from Milwaukee, Carl Benz, he was German. You see the microphones, the Christmas tree? They all come from Germany. Tannenbaum, all that.
I think you're right on firsts. I think Byron built a lot of firsts in there. First man on the moon, first president to visit China. I mean, you could probably develop a list and just go on and on. First flight, first settlement in America. I mean, first across Columbus. Supposedly, but I think there's a lot of firsts in there. Then that might be, if you develop a list, that might be helpful. I was actually thinking to start developing what I call node list of things that connect together to one specific topic, or some phraseology or word reference. Or
everybody needs to do that. I mean, once you find the topic of the puzzle, it's easy to chase down the rest of that illusion. Because if it was firearms, you just go, I'm going to read this story, and anything that has holsters, Wild West, anything that has anything to do with a gun is what I'm looking for.
Right. Well, like to me,
and it's not easy. That's why a lot of people, they just take this book and go, dude, I'm done with this.
Yeah. Well,
that's what most people do. And Byron said you got to be playful, and he didn't care as long as you bought it. But that's why Byron told everybody it's easy. If he sat there and was honest, he'd go, listen, this is the most difficult damn treasure hunt in the world, and it's going to drive you nuts. And you're going to lose it. Nobody would have bought it.
Yeah,
it's like, here, man, eat this chip. It's fire hot. You don't tell that before you give it to your friends. You go, no, it's not that bad.
Yeah, try it. You'll like it.
And once they eat it, they go, oh, you should have done that.
Yeah, but West
did the same thing to me. This book made me go so nuts. I went, screw this crap, and I went.
When did you get out of the asylum? When did you get out of the asylum? I'm just kind of curious.
Dude, my wife goes, you need to put that book away.
Oh,
I was racking my brain going, I don't understand this.
My wife would give me looks, and then she'd like she'd be making remarks and stuff.
Oh yeah, my
Thankfully
wife
now,
hates this book.
thankfully right now she's out somewhere. She's not around here.
Yeah, my
Just
wife went to take a nap.
talking about The Secret. She's nowhere into it. And she would roll her eyes. Oh boy, he's talking to so and so about The Secret. She'd roll her eyes. Oh, there it goes.
Research, start the book. If you just got the book, start. I tell it because I was like, you know what? I went down that when I first got the book, I was like, oh, everybody's at Fountain of Youth. There's nothing there. Yeah, I see the indigenous tribe reference, Timucuan Indians, Chief Seloy. But it's not really about Ponce de Leon. It's about Mendez.
Well, why would
it's about the founding of St. Augustine. Mendez ain't mentioned at all in the book.
Yeah, and why would he bury something on a private park that you have to pay to get in?
No, says that. It says that in the book. He says no private property of anybody involved with this book, but he means no private property. Period. Listen, Byron, Ben Asen said Byron was a Boy Scout. He didn't drink, smoke. He wasn't going to get arrested. He wasn't going to commit no crime. Yeah. Byron had a very successful business. He had money. He Ben told me, he didn't live extravagant, super rich lifestyle either. He drove an old car. Yeah. He's not going to make you go do anything that's going to get you. The people that have been arrested at the Wright Brothers Memorial,
right?
He wasn't jumping on the private property over a fence at night and digging. Because if you came out there, the owner's like, "Can I help you?" "Oh yeah, this dude buried a treasure box out here somewhere, and I'm going to dig it up." The guy would go, "Get the hell off my property."
Sure.
Or I'll call the cops.
That brings up a point I wanted to make also on the, what I believe at Coit Tower, that there's a cast there. I don't want anybody digging there. In 2008.
Oh, they will.
That went from city property to federal property. That is now federal property. And they're not going to be very nice to you. If you're up there digging around up there, you're without a permit and maybe even an archaeologist, you're in big trouble. Now, if you
it's just like Golden Gate, San Francisco, at least the city of San Francisco said, "Hey, they show an interest in this. You got to pay. You got to get a permit. Right. They check where you want to dig."
Yeah,
these other cities, they don't want nothing. They had damage for years because of specific people involved in the secret. You like what you just said, Coit Tower. Don't go dig there, but somebody will.
I was actually digging somewhere, and I had a permit to be doing what I was doing. And this guy walks over that was sitting on a bench, and we started talking, and I was honest with him, and he says, "Oh, you know what? There was a guy digging on a park, and it was nearby." And he said, "I called the cops on him." And I said, "You did?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he told me the whole story about how this guy told the cops that he had a license, that he was a professional treasure hunter. And I said, "No, there's nobody that did that," or he just talked himself out of getting.
There's no such thing.
And I think I know who he was, and I just kind of laughed because I didn't want it to go any further, but I thought it was really funny talking. Yeah, to the guy.
I mean, some of these areas, I gave away the ball thrower statue in San Francisco. That's where I believe it is 100% because that's where the book.
Statue?
It's called the ball thrower statue. It's by sculptor Douglas Tilden, he divorced his wife because he actually got into. His work is. God, I was looking this up the other day. Douglas Tilden is very popular in the gay community. He's been dead a long time, but he did the ball thrower. He did the wrestler, which he did a few sports sculptures. Okay. But rumor is he got into a gay relationship with a mentor in France. Wife found out about it. This is how he connects back to the Stonewall. And they talked about one. I think it's called the Wrestler. It's a statue of this big muscular guy with his leg out, and this other guy's down there bandaging his leg up. Right. So it's got these homosexual tendencies.
Yeah.
This is history. YouTube, don't boot us for that. But it's almost how like Three's Company.
Yeah.
Three's Company's popular on Logo to Gay channel because Jack is tricking Mr. Furley into thinking he's gay.
Oh, he's tricking, kind of like Tricky Dick.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, because he's not supposed to be living with two women.
Yeah,
that
I
he's not
remember.
married to.
Yeah.
So Mr. Furley thinks Jack is gay the whole time, you know.
Yeah.
So or Golden Girls or whatever, and
Yeah. Okay.
that illusion and stuff like that. So
Well, in the one of the very last ferries, there's a hat on a lady, and it's if you kind of do a little research on it, there is a place in San Francisco, not far from Coit Tower, but I think they did a lot of that gay theater there.
yeah,
remember
San Francisco is probably the most gayest city in California. You know,
the hat I'm talking about actually has Coit Tower in it and some other things, and I'm like, that's a clue somehow, but I don't know if it's just a reference.
Oh yeah, I'm not even going to tell you about the Coit Tower research I did. There's a whole bunch of gayness wrapped around that whole area. That's I don't know.
Anyway.
That's like an evil side. Or there might be kids watching, so we don't want to get into that. But there are a lot of the Ben Franklin stuff, the Stonewall riot stuff. San Francisco is the city. Basically, it's like you come to Florida and they go, hey, if I'm gay, where's the place to go hang out? Like Tampa or Key West.
Well, yeah, and I know in Maryland they had, I think it was Rehoboth Beach, or you can go on. Yeah. I understand that. Yeah,
and New York City had back in the day. There was that one area, like if you're down there, or New Orleans, the one in the Bourbon Street.
Oh yeah.
I was down there for a girl one time. She was from there back in my Army days. And she's like, I was like, what the hell is this? I said, God, this bar's like all guys. And she starts laughing. And the guy goes, hey, Army boy, come on in here. And I was like, oh crap. She said, okay. So I didn't realize that one end of Bourbon Street is the gay area,
Well, I have a very funny story about Boston, and I was in uniform, Navy, and I went into this place and it was a gay bar. And it was a gay hotel and a gay bar. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. It was like that Blue Oyster bar.
Here?
Dun, 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 dun,
I turned around. I did like a U-turn. Like, what am I, like, oh boy.
Yeah. She was like, yeah, that was funny. I said, it didn't bother me. I said, I didn't care, but
yeah.
She goes, oh yeah, this whole end down here. Cause we just kept walking. She goes, this whole end, all these bars are gay bars on this end of Bourbon Street.
Yeah. Well,
and I said, okay, well, I said, I'm sure they'd invite me in, but they don't want you there. So let's go back.
The funny thing is my friend booked the hotel for a convention. It wasn't me. It was my friend. So I'm like, oh, well, we're here now. So what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. But for people that are like, hey,
he didn't have a clue.
Stonewall in the San Francisco verse is a clue to the Stonewall riots.
Okay.
Did Byron use gay history in the secret book? Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Well, because it specifically, and if you go back in the heydays, East, West Coast, we know that's all part of the book. If you said, hey, 1982, East Coast, West Coast, gay, what are the two epicenters? California, New York City, San Francisco, California. Yeah. There you go.
Or I would say Philadelphia, just because of the movie that came out about AIDS. What was that, Philadelphia Story?
Yeah.
Or whatever it was?
Yeah.
But
yeah, Philadia. With
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know.
I think Patient Zero was in New York, but back even in 82, 70s leading up to 80s, that's where you would have went. If you're saying, hey, I'm going to do a book about gay men. What cities on each coast do I need to go to? They'd go New York, San Francisco.
Yeah.
Stonewall has a connection between both, and they both had their Stonewall events with the police and the riots in San Francisco because of what happened in New York.
Yeah.
And it's the same theme of people, the anti-Semitism of the Jewish people. Byron, it just seemed like Byron respected all the history, and he's going to use all the history.
Yeah.
You know? And don't be shocked because it's illusion. So he's not going to use that, but he uses the word Stonewall. Even today, 43 years later, you look up Stonewall, it's going to go right to that gay event of the Stonewall riots.
Yeah, could be.
And a lot of people are like, Stonewall Jackson? Yeah, possibly. No, he don't have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
There was a Stonewall baseball player. I just tried to make every connection to that to baseball.
Well, you might be right. And like you've said, we've said that these things are interpretation. That's why it makes it so difficult. It's funny because we have three guys here that had completely different spots in San Francisco and maybe completely different spots on some of the other puzzles.
It's
interpretation.
I was ripping my hair out until JJP, when he said, "Oh, those are bookends." He was on another podcast, I think Ward's podcast.
Okay.
And he looked at something and he goes, "Oh, that's the bookends." You could see the bookends in the shape of the painting. It looks like the ends of two books.
Arches. I actually took pictures. I ordered some cheap bookends and I took pictures of them because that was the feature, was the arch. And also it's puzzle number 1, puzzle number 12. They're on each end. The East Coast, the West Coast, they're on either end. They're bookends.
I mean, how many more clues you need? Like, there's your first.
More. Yeah.
And then you got clues to two cities in California. That's the second part. You got to figure out. Then you got to figure out which city of the two. Right. But then I was like, what the hell? And here's a bookend. And I started with the Chinese.
Okay.
And I forgot what that led to. It led to Alberta. There's a story there, and it says Alberta and I think Alabama. And I was like, what the hell?
I don't know.
And then I came across what I'd already known about the Expos in Montreal. The Montreal Expos, which was Canada's first baseball team. And I knew about the Chicago American Giants. But they were named after the 67 Expo.
Was the 67 Expo, was that in Montreal?
Yep.
Yeah, I looked at that, and to me, there were a lot of clues that led to around that those Olympic or whatever you call them areas. There was an area or two, and I thought, well, that's changed a lot since then.
The architecture, the geometry. Buckmeister Fuller, who's mentioned in the book.
Yep.
He connects Houston to Chicago to even San Francisco with the Panamanian Expo. I don't remember what year that was. The Liberty Bell that traveled around all these particular cities, more cities that are part of the secret treasures, but it helps you narrow down. Well, the Liberty Bell was here and it was here. Yeah. The Liberty Bell actually stopped in Cleveland about 800 yards from the Greek Gardens before it was picked up by a equestrian team. So equestrian is Greek, right? So in the Cleveland painting, Greek, you got the centaur. The equestrian team escorted the Liberty Bell to the 1893 Chicago exhibition in Chicago.
All right.
So you got horses, you got equestrian, which is a Greek word.
Wasn't there like Liberty Street or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, there's train tracks. I think they're right on the water, or they were that at that time. But the Liberty Bell was coming through. It only visited so many cities, and these were back in these days. These were monster events. 20,000 people were showing up out there to go, holy crap! There's the Liberty Bell, because they knew what it meant. They knew the symbolism of the Liberty Bell, which a lot of people today are like, Liberty Bell, what the hell is that? It's forgotten history, what it represented, what it meant.
What's kind of
Revolutionary War, these people understood that.
What's kind of cool is I didn't particularly care for history when I was younger. I was a math and science guy. Now I kind of like history, and it's pretty fascinating.
I go down to St. Augustine, and I get these people are like, yeah, we're going on a tour. So I'll take you on a tour. You want to see some stuff?
I'll bet you could.
The first Thanksgiving happened. They're like, what? Here?
Yep.
I was like, yeah, not the Pilgrims. Here. This is where it really happened.
Oh, that's funny.
I mean, there's there was it was a group of black people I took down there, and I was telling them about, Fort Mose. And this was actually the first, because it was under Spanish control in the early days before, the 13 colonies, blacks used to haul butt down in St. Augustine because the Spanish didn't allow it. Fort Mose, they're actually getting ready to rebuild that fort, a replica of it, exactly like it was. And that's where, when you look in the secret book, that's why the garden goyle is a stalk of corn. Because when the slaves got down there, the people that were already there were like, we're going to teach you guys how to farm. Corn was one of the first things they started to farm. The corn, that's its connection to the African of the garden goyle. And that puts you at Fort Mose, but that's not where the cask is buried. And that's also federally protected property. It's north of downtown St. Augustine. And it's under National Park Service protection.
Yeah.
But they first time I ever went there last year, they or it might have been earlier this year, they showed a rendition. So they're going to rebuild the fort exactly like it was back then.
Oh,
and there's nature trails out there and stuff, but there's not really nothing to see. But early days of St. Augustine, I think it was either torn down or burned down or something like that. But Byron said, yeah, the secret's easy. That's if you know the history. Or like up in Chicago with Rob and his friends, they that's the water tower. They recognized it because they grew up there.
They identified it.
I wouldn't have. Yeah, I wouldn't have. I was like, I've never been to Chicago. I've been to the airport. Oh, that's the water tower. Where's that? Chicago. Oh, I don't know what the hell that is.
Yeah.
What it means, what it represents today, what it used to be. Now it's a memorial to Chicago's Great Fire. And then you find out stuff in the secret, like Milwaukee's beer industry only took off because of the Chicago fire, because they didn't have fresh water and the place burned down, most of everything. So Milwaukee, they were like, hey, who's making the beer? Milwaukee's like, we'll take it. Milwaukee's beer exploded, which is part of the secret for Milwaukee too. It's part of the German, and it's still celebrated. There's beer festivals there for a reason. Laverne and Shirley, Milwaukee's best. If Chicago had its Great Fire, Milwaukee would have never had a beer industry. Huh. You got to know all this. This is what makes it all easy, because the beer is part of the Milwaukee puzzle. But stuff in the paintings, they're vague. I mean, it's like if I just sat here and went, a pen. Well, what does that mean? How does that lead me to treasure? You figure it out. What's the first thing you do? Where did this come from? And it's going to go way back to writing. They're going to say, oh, they used to use blood, and they used to use a stick of blood, and so you got to follow the entire, like how the Warner von Brownie, he's the father of rocketry. Octave, he's the father of aviation. Rubes Foster, he's the father of the Negro Baseball League. What else could you throw in there? Anything, the Wright brothers, they're you can call them the fathers of first powered flight. All these are very relevant. And you gotta look at, if anybody, like if you today you did a treasure hunt and you said, here you go. It's like, what is this? An iPhone? No, not an iPhone. It's a phone. Yes. It's also a computer. But if I worked backwards from Alexander Graham Bell, and you're following to the place where he actually invented the telephone or whatever, and you go and there's, hey, is there a statue to any of the history? Yeah, there's his statue right down the street. That's where I'm going to bury this stuff.
Yeah, and it's kind of like there's other clues that are built into the art. Like, for instance, you're talking about telegraph or telephone or whatever. If you look at Mind Boggles and you look at the art and you look at how,
oh yeah,
it looks like a telegraph.
You and me know what that vampire sucking in the brain means, right? Because your parents used to tell you, get away from the TV. You're gonna go blind.
Yep. And there's also like some CIA
It rots your
stuff,
brain.
CIA history and where that was done, like San Francisco. And there was like
Exactly.
the Telegraph being like Telegraph Hill, maybe. I mean, so that one might be related to San Francisco, but who knows? So.
And see that the mind boggles. It part of that's New York because of Albert Einstein. This is crazy history. See, this is how my brain works because you just triggered a file of the secret. So Cleveland was one of the first cities, and you'd think it'd be New York. Cleveland was one of the first cities where most of the households had a television. Right? Secondly, when the television was first created, the image was blurry, and they couldn't figure out how to make the image viewable and clear until they used a technique developed by Albert Einstein to get it. It's still used today on your screens, on your TV. It's still used today. But it was that curved glass back in the day. They were like, we see the picture, but it's blurry. So they can make out there's people and something's happening, but it's blurry.
Oh.
And when I was, okay, what is this? And I'm trying to remember, I tossed my book, but what puzzle that actually connected to. And like Milwaukee and Cleveland also have a, back in the early days of radio. The other day I watched the movie The Sting.
Robert Redford.
Yeah. So they do that con where the race has already happened, the horse race, and the results are sent Western Union, but he says, I got a guy that intercepts it so you can place the bet. And then they got the guy faking like, there's, Buckwheat's in the turn. And, they're faking it all just to get Robert Shaw out of $500,000. But Milwaukee and Cleveland were one of the first cities, along with Chicago, to receive messages from the East Coast. These were in the days of westward expansion, which also has to do with, previous to that was Teddy Roosevelt and, and all that stuff, moving out west. But the early days of communication, so it's like if news was happening on East Coast and say they were getting it, whatever, it's like there's this delay getting it out, how either what was it called? Like where they wire.
You mean Morse code?
Yeah. They used to send messages from town to town, but when they first actually got transmission towers where they could broadcast like a Yankees game to Milwaukee, back in the day, we don't even think about that today. We get in the car and turn on a radio.
Right.
Back then, this was before TV. People had radios. And they're listening to what's happening in the wars and all that stuff. Right. They don't have television. People don't have TVs.
Well, even you know what they used at Telegraph Hill in San Francisco for? They used to signal the ships, and they started with semaphore, or something like semaphore.
Mm-hmm.
And then they as the technology changed, so did the communications from there.
Yeah,
and that's why they call it Telegraph Hill. Still some and this stuff is included in the secret. I mean, the Spanish American War, he uses the indigenous tribes people to put you in a bunch of areas. So New York, it's not in the Catskills, but that's not where the treasure is. But he's giving you these proximal locations. He's putting you in people. All the people out there today that go, New York is just New York City. No, it's not. New York, Buffalo's New York. The state of New York is huge. It's not just New York City. Right. Sex and the City TV show. You people need to expand your minds. They got country. They got hunting out there. Well, New
York is huge.
The marketing was I love New York. And I remember thinking, gee, who's going to say that? I couldn't live in a packed city like that, and who would love New York City? That was me.
I like it.
In a wide open area in Texas, I couldn't do that. But of course, then I get to New York City and I travel around. I look at the parks and I look at, so my attitude, my thoughts is a little bit changed. But
you can walk a lot of places.
But the point is that when they said I love New York, I thought New York City, and of course the commercial, actually, I don't know if you were around back then. They had a commercial and it showed the woods and the forests of New York and the boating and all these other activities. It wasn't like Manhattan they were showing,
Yeah.
They might have shown.
Yeah, I've had people I've talked to and they're like, what? Like, I was like, yeah, like you've never heard of upstate New York?
Yeah,
I said, but the New York Giants, the New York Jets, and the Buffalo, NFL team, they're all in New York. They're all in the state of New York, and they're thinking Buffalo's like its own state, or I don't know, Buffalo's in New York. It's like, come on,
yeah.
It's just there's always been, somebody said a while back, they're like, Byron could have used Big Apple or so. I said, one of the New York stories, he says Apple, but he's talking about computers. But Apple's Apple.
Yeah,
Big Apple, the Apple symbol.
Something about
if you looked at that, you'd go New York, Apple Computers.
Yeah. Anyway,
he is the Statue of Liberty's face to give you the clue to New York. But when you get to New York, you got 5 boroughs. You go, which borough is it in?
Right.
Decipher the clues in the book. Figure out which one. Don't go to Brooklyn just because Byron grew up there.
Yep.
Jersey's right over there. You find out the Statue of Liberty. A lot of people go, it's in Jersey. It's not New York. New York goes, no, it's not. And they go, yeah, it is. It's on our side of the river.
Yeah, that's right. Mark's saying that. The Von Briesen Park, whatever.
Yeah. So if you went Statue of Liberty, you're like, wait, is this New York or Jersey? Because it's actually in Jersey. This is stuff Byron left you to figure out. It's like nothing easy about it. Nothing easy about it. But the clues all lead you to Manhattan. Gray Giants, my opinion, is Manhattan. It's all the skyscrapers. It's like, and you make those determinations and you prove that by going through the book.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Skyscraper history. Gray Giant skyscrapers. New York had the first. Then it was Chicago. Modern skyscrapers are in Houston. That's all. The most modern skyscrapers, if you want to go see the glass skyscrapers, that their glass is made of a hot, cold glass because they have to flex. And then when you look at skyscrapers and go, first city that tried to do the glass skyscrapers was Chicago. But what problem were they having in Chicago? The panels of glass were popping out and dropping to the streets. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, it's funny because you mentioned that area and on the art where the corporate giants, where's the corporate giant on that one? He's on a tall tower, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at that, the planes are flying around. They got nets, say EPA or whatever. So you start thinking about King Kong. And where was King Kong? Well, he's on the Empire State Building, right?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that if you actually look at that building, the structure in the art, it doesn't look like the Empire State Building.
It's exactly like the one from the movie.
And it's exactly the same as the poster. And if you look at the poster,
it's Empire State Building, but it's not.
But
I don't know why they didn't use a model.
Here's my point. What does the top of that building have? It has dots, circles that look like aces. Mm-hmm. And what is the other puzzle about Aces High? You see, there's a connection there.
Yeah.
And they use the art. If you look at the poster, it's almost a perfect match to the poster from 19 whatever it was, way back when, 30 something, whatever it was. And and if you look at the actors in that show, it was Faye. Now I don't know if there's a connection to Faye's Delight. And if you look at the other actor, I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but that name Armstrong, I think it is. Armstrong was, and it has pictures of those two were the main characters. So he had Armstrong and Faye.
Yeah, and it looks like a rocket.
So like, yeah, so I'm thinking, why isn't it really, of all the things to pick, why would you pick something that looks like that? And I think it's because the top of it looks more like Coit Tower than it does the Empire State. I think it's just a connection.
No, it looks nothing like the Empire State Building.
Right.
But that's what they used in 1933 King Kong. And I looked it up and I said, what building is that supposed to be? They're like, it's supposed to be the Empire State Building. Right. But it doesn't look anything like it.
Exactly. And what's important about the 1930s? Again, they had the San Francisco Union riots. And if you look at Job Goblin, the unions and the rioting, you look at the mural inside Coit Tower, the 30s. So there's a lot of 1930s stuff that was going on that I think you find in the book. Now, are those coincidences? They might be, but they might not be. So, anyway,
when you know the history and stuff, you see it. It's just I don't know how to. And the thing is, I've done so many years of research. I can't. Like one of my buddies, he's like, dude, you can't expect people to understand illusion when you know what you know about what you've decided. I mean, there's stories. This is my second book because I destroyed the first one. I got stories in here I haven't even touched. I haven't even touched some of these stories because I really don't want to do any more research. So I start looking at. I turn the page and I hit a story where I go, I haven't made a mark on it. Like here's an example. Okay, so everybody knows this story.
Which one is it?
The Calcabus. But if you look at the clock, it tells you exactly which puzzle to attach it to.
I think so because it's got a 3 and a 5 on it.
Yep, 2 o'clock. It's not 3 yet, so it's 2 something. And you got the shapes. You see this shape right here? Let me see. I don't know where the hell my camera is. This shape right here.
Yeah, it's like a cone.
Is in the Milwaukee painting. It's called a wedge.
Maybe.
This also has to do with, you see California and Giant are listed in it.
Right, and look at the wing on that one bird. Why put a wing? Why put a wing with a single dot circle on it? That's not a normal shape. It's not a natural shape. That's an ace.
Yeah. There's a 9 on his shirt.
And not only that, when you find some of these aces, if there's an arc around it, if you start looking at that and what's actually happening at that drinking fountain, that's an ace and a concrete arc that goes around that fountain. And you look at the ear in Corporate Giants. That's not a normal. Who would draw an ear that looks like that Corporate Giant that's laying down that ear? Who and why so much detail? That's an artist wouldn't put all that work in drawing something that's unnatural. That is actually telling you something. And
I mean, the words in this calc. So you got Fifth, Proud Tall Fifth. That's in Milwaukee. The Times Milwaukee. You got Giant. You got California. Smoke still drifting.
Right there you go. What is smoke? Smoke is a shapeshifter. What is calculus? It's changing. It's the science of changing math. Changing. It's a shapeshifter.
Yeah. And then right here it says smoke still drifting over test sites across the Southwest. That's Los Alamos, New Mexico. That is the Manhattan Project. That is Trinity. Test sites across the Southwest.
All right.
Microchip computers. This all cuts back to the glitches. Any computer, MIT. You got. This is basically the math. Nobel Prize.
Math. Yep.
Yeah. Anything connect? You go. Okay, this has to do with computers and math, and I see computer 256K, Silicon Valley. Where's Silicon Valley? Computers, New York. All this jumps right back and forth.
Glitches is San Francisco, New York. Absolutely. Look
That's
at
right.
the little guy figures.
And you see the Asian guys. You see the Chinese guys in the imagery.
That's what I'm getting at. The Chinese guys.
Yeah.
exactly.
That's the stuff you need to look at.
Yeah.
All right,
Anyway,
we've been there 2 hours 34 minutes.
You could go on and on and on, but I'm kind of getting worn out because you're
I know. I mean, this is just to give ideas. When we
Yeah.
come on here and we tell people, a lot of people ain't looking at this. Oh, Chinese guys, I see them in the glitches. Yeah, look at the illustrations. How those connect to California in a Chinese ferry.
Right.
And when you go out there, that's because of the Warner von Brownie, which tells you Florida, Texas, California. But with that puzzle, you need to figure out what your actual immigration is. It's like some of the stories will say East European. They'll say Asian. Okay, Asia's got a lot of countries in it. What specific immigration are you talking about? When Warner von Brownie and the rockets, before that was gunpowder and fireworks, and who invented that? The Chinese.
Yeah.
That's how you figure out it's Chinese.
You and I kind of are like the same kind of thoughts. You got to focus on details, and some people don't like doing that.
It's three-dimensional thinking. You got to think three-dimensionally.
Some people just like to go, oh, this looks like that, therefore it is.
Exactly.
And that's why I have a problem with some of the overlays. Now, maybe an overlay here or there, yeah. And there's one that I think is absolutely correct by a fellow teammate on the willy-nilly digging team.
A lot of people did that years. It was like 5+ years ago. I started looking at overlays, but you got to look at what could Byron really accomplish back from 77 to pretty much 81.
Well, he could project it on a board and then draw it, and then there you go. Or have an artist do the same. I understand that.
Yeah,
I don't think
that would have been difficult, incredibly difficult to even.
Not only that, it's like how many matches can you make off of some shapes? I think he can make an awful lot of matches, like that. We were talking earlier about San Francisco and that shoreline. It matches up right at the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's so matches, but it does. If you look closely, it really doesn't on part of it. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, you kind of force that to fit. I get that.
It's very similar, but it would have, it's like the St. Augustine puzzle with Anastasia Island. It's not all exact, but there's enough detail in the shape where you go, that is Anastasia Island. You come downtown St. Augustine, you cross the Bridge of the Lions, you're on Anastasia Island.
Okay.
That is another thing. And what does it do? Is anything on Anastasia Island across from downtown St. Augustine? No. That proves St. Augustine, again, with Seloy, the Timucuanan Indians, the founding of St. Augustine, which is September 8th. These things, and then you go, okay, well, what does that have? Nothing. All that stuff proves St. Augustine. The rest of the puzzle, where the puzzle is, this stuff has nothing to do with it. Behind green picket fences. That was the thing in St. Augustine. If you're from this area, you know that. I think it was an ordinance. I don't know. But if someone had a picket fence is one upright with at least 2 or more horizontal cross members. That's the definition of a picket fence. So, and they were all green. Everybody that had them were green. Outside the alligator farm, they're still green. At one time, they were all green, and I don't know why. Even my aunt said that. She goes, every damn thing down there was green. The fence posts, everything.
That's a problem, because if you're looking for something, you want to be finding something unique to an area where other clues, where it all matches together. And if you have something like a green picket fence, that clue doesn't help a lot. I'm sorry. It's everywhere.
No, and you got to look at the way he did the verse. It says behind a green picket fence.
Yeah.
But you basically the way I interpret that is, if you're outside the city of St. Augustine, you're not behind any of them. If you get into St. Augustine, you're basically downtown St. Augustine, you'd be behind all the green picket fences, because they basically encompass the city.
Yeah.
They were everywhere.
Yeah, I didn't.
But could it mean that you have to go across a green picket fence to dig the treasure up? Yes, it could.
Yeah.
But that picket fence might not be green today.
Right.
And you got to look, just because you go, well, I got a picket fence around my yard. And, there might be a smaller picket fence around something that doesn't encompass a property. It might encompass something else. It might not be as big as you think.
Or the homeowner might have replaced the green picket fence with like a rock wall.
Exactly.
Like if
things could have changed.
The backside of the Fountain of Youth, that there was a back gate on Magnolia. You probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I saw a theory and I kind of liked it. It wasn't my theory, but it was, because you had some things like a street light, you had a drain for water, the rainwater falls or whatever. And you had you could get long-term passes by there, or you could go in and out there or something. And to me, it wasn't on the property. It was outside, and it was probably on maybe city property where it had an easement or something. But right at that corner, there's a homeowner. I was looking on the Google Earth, and that he changed that area right there at that site. And so I'm thinking, well, I don't know if it was there, if it's still there, if it's changed, or
yeah.
And that's part of the thing that makes these difficult is the changes that happened, since he buried them. But
yeah. And there in St. Augustine, there's been major. St. Augustine is basically the way it is today because of the Spanish that founded it and Henry Flagler, the German, who turned it into a tourist trap, and which it still is today. But when you also go to Paul Green, the composer and playwright that did The Lost Colony in Roanoke,
yeah,
and he also did Cross and Sword in St. Augustine, and those are the only two plays like that he's ever done.
Oh, okay.
So when you behind a green picket fence, that word green is another clue to Paul Green. So you got Flagler, the German. Paul Green, he's of German descent too. And even in the book, when it says, I think in the notes, I think it's the Jack Lectern, it says UNC, University of North Carolina. Yeah. That's where Paul Green was. And there's like, I think on the college property, they got Paul Green's old little cottage that he used to write his work in. So he has a direct connection to UNC, St. Augustine, and Roanoke Island because of two plays, the only two state plays he did, which were basically John White, which is in the Roanoke thing, where white's in color, bringing first attempt of the British to colonize Roanoke Island that failed. And then Cross and Sword is basically about Mendez's landing, religious landing, meeting the Native Americans. There you go. They're all connected.
Well, I'll tell you what.
And Celoid, all that stuff's in the book.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say I knew very little about St. Augustine or Roanoke until this puzzle came out. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool, But
Roanoke is it's British and German. But the British has to do with the Elizabethan Gardens, which was built to honor them and what they did. The entire story of John White. His two maps are in the little museum. The Lost Colony play next door, which was written by Paul Green, tells a lot about that story.
Yep.
And it puts you in that area right there.
You got
islands in the painting.
Harriet's Trail.
Yep.
And I think there's some possible clues there.
But the walking path takes you through the gardens, past Circle Square, which is the middle. There's a circle fountain. It's a square garden.
Yeah.
A path beckons you to Micah Driftwood, which is the beach.
Yep.
Then it says gaze north at the wing of the Wright Brothers Memorial.
Yeah.
So when you like say your point of view of me, I walked out onto the beach there on the north end of Roanoke Island. And I held up a compass. Straight ahead of me is north.
Oh, yeah.
When I take that compass and I go to the 1 o'clock degrees on the compass, it is pointing right at the side of the Wright Brothers Memorial, the wing. It says, gaze north at the wing and dig right in front of you. Well, but that beach has been completely eroded out.
Yeah.
Now, as of last year, you can't even dig on that beach anymore without getting arrested.
Well, here's the other thing. Gates like that, they swing, and they
Mhm.
also, you can call them a wing because it's a wing gate.
Yeah.
So maybe gaze north at the wing was a localization clue as well. It's a play on words with swing. And maybe there was, like I said, there some of these have more than one meaning. Maybe it also meant the gate wing,
Yeah.
not just the wing that you saw up north, because you're trying to localize the puzzle. Why would he's got you going around in circles like the bug, is it what's the fairy that has bugbear? The
Yeah.
bugbear will get you lost in the woods or whatever. Why? Because you're going around in circles
Yep.
trying to find this cask, and it directs you around in a big circle.
And that puzzle, it's the hard part's not the end. The part's digging it up. The walking path is easy. The part of the puzzle in the book that puts you at the Waterside Theater and the Elizabethan Gardens is the difficult part to decipher. But that puzzle is, once you go through all the history and you look back, you go, actually, this is pretty freaking easy. I mean,
I'm not so sure.
The armor, everybody's like Scarecrow, Wizard of Oz. I'm like, that's Frank L. Baum wrote the Wizard of Oz. That bridge they built to Roanoke Island was called the William Baum Bridge. Same last name. That's the illusion. Nothing Wizard of Oz. The armor is that, if you look at that kind of armor, it's very close to Queen Elizabeth I's favorite knight's armor that's on display at a museum in Britain. Yeah. But it's been tweaked. The horse face for Nag's Head, the horns for Kill Devil Hills, baseball on it, the airplane that's on the armor, the bells, whatever they represent. A lot of that stuff you didn't really need, but I knew the story of the Lost Colony, but Roanoke Island, until I did the book Roanoke Island and the Waterside Theater, I didn't know any of that stuff was there.
You didn't know Andy Griffith used to be there, did you? Andy Griffith.
No.
Andy was started out down there on a stage right there.
Yeah.
Then he went on to become a sheriff because he moved, right?
But yeah, 2 years ago, I talked to the guys at Waterside Theater, and they just told me about an arrest they had. There was a whole group in the theater at night. He goes, man, we got security feature. We got cameras. We got a monitoring security company. They're like, hey, man, there's dudes like in the theater area with shovels. Oh, cops went in there. Wright Brothers Memorial arrest. It's like, that's my interpretation. At the end, Micah Driftwood.
Yeah.
Driftwood you only find on the beach. And they know it because a girl there called me and said, hey, you can't even dig on the beach anymore. You can't be out there at night.
Well, good. Good. I mean, and I don't think people need to be digging without permission some of these areas, because they're just going to buy them some trouble. And what if they even found the cask? What, are they going to tell everybody where they found it? Yeah. Hey, I was digging illegally. Look what I got now.
A lot of these cities will come after you. They don't care where you're at. If they get their district attorney to sign an extradition warrant for your arrest, you get stopped by a cop, you can be in California, and they're going to ship you all the way to Roanoke Island, St. Augustine, whatever.
Yeah. So anyway,
it's like, it's no digging. Some people out there have ruined it for everybody.
Yep.
Josh Gates is pretty much out.
They dig these big holes and they just not fill them in. And
simple stuff.
Geez, at least fill in holes.
Stop going. If you're new to the secret, don't go on private property. Don't go in places after they close.
Yeah,
Byron didn't do any of that.
First of all, you're looking for a box that's like this size. I mean, what are the odds you're even going to find it where you're digging and probing? Go ahead and probe. There's a rock down there. You're going to dig up a rock.
There's part of me has always thought, when I've gotten, which is basically last year. Once Milwaukee was the last one I was working on. Once another person came and basically Cindy Henry said, yeah, I said, oh man, I was there, but I didn't think he's going to use that immigration again. So I abandoned that. I've been out to these places. These are not, I don't think they were, Byron didn't intend for people to dig these things up. Even in Chicago, they were like digging all over the place.
Yeah.
It's there to fulfill the book, so he can't
size.
get in trouble. But he's like, listen, if they're gonna have to dig exactly right there.
Yeah.
And they're gonna have to probe a line at a time. They're gonna have a compass. It was, if this book had exploded, I think we'd still be where we're at right now. Maybe 2 more had been found.
Yeah.
But the damage would be so immense, we'd all be right where we're at right now.
Either that, or he just had no clue. I mean, how hard it would be to find these by digging.
I think by burying them the way he did, and not, there's no, it's right there. X marks the spot.
Well, that's what
Milwaukee, there is. And I think it's because of difficulty.
The back of the book might be telling us exactly where it is. So we might differ on that.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked. I mean, the places I've come to, there's a lot of stuff I can conclude. And years ago I came up with that. I said, okay, so why was it there in Chicago? So you're looking at the fence.
Yeah.
And it's a point of view at that point. He says, don't use the perspective. So you're standing there, you're squared up with the fence. Yeah. The left side of the fence is 9. The right side's 3. You're 6. And basically the cask is down here to your right at 5 o'clock. And Rob Warble said that's about where it was. So 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now, Cleveland, you come into the Greek Gardens, you're on one side. The back side has a lower elevation, has steps. When you go around there and you look at the wall, you're 6 again. The left side's 9. The right side's 3. And it was in the planter on the back side over on the right side, which is 3 o'clock, which is the painting. And Chicago or Boston, when you go up to home plate, basically the third baseline is north. So north is 12. You find 8 o'clock across the plate. It's where the catcher and umpire stand. I've already kind of had somebody talk with one of the guys that was out there. I was trying to get him on a statement or on a podcast, but this guy said he was digging behind home plate.
Yeah.
When this is the area he was digging up to home plate when he noticed a piece of plexiglass.
Yeah, but
he had come through there already.
Yeah, but they I'm sure had taken the home plate away, so they might have known about where the home plate was with all the dirt being moved around. And so I'm not so sure the guy knew exactly where he was digging, although they had some utilities I think they were trying to avoid or whatever, and maybe
there was a pipe, there was a old pipe area going back in front of the cat fence.
But when they're looking through all of this dirt, there was a whole bunch of dirt apparently. So to me that means they did a lot of digging, and they stirred
he had come from the fence to home plate, then started down the third baseline. But you saw in that episode where, and that what you saw on TV ain't what really happened, from what I've been told.
That's my understanding. That was a reenactment.
Yeah, he was out there for days, and then he actually found a piece of it. But on the show, the first piles the guy had dug were on the bottom. So Josh Gates says, we need to get down these piles. And the guy goes, I got a front end loader. So basically what they had to do is smooth it all out, get all that top dirt off, which he dug up later because everything was that. And they still didn't find everything. So it's like smoothing it out probably destroyed the rest of it. But it was the first shovels is what contained the cask.
Yeah,
and they were on the bottom of the pile when Josh Gates got there.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway. But he had already found the piece of the key, and all that stuff you saw on TV was supposedly staged. That's TV. They got to make it exciting. Nobody should have a problem with that.
Trying to make it exciting. Exactly.
Yeah. Josh Gates ain't going to do one. Hey, we're going to do a 4-hour expedition unknown where you're going to watch us dig through dirt for 6 hours. Yeah. It's like nobody was going to watch that.
A little off topic. If you watch those shows where he's scuba diving, you can hear them like talking to each other.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone scuba diving? Do you think they're talking to each other under the water? No.
Those masks you can. They got communication rigs in them.
I don't buy that. I think they might be doing some hand signals, and then they add the audio in later on. I might be wrong. Might be just
they'll usually communicate with the dive boat. It's based on visibility and stuff, but I've seen that. Even the deep sea divers can got communication system.
I'm very skeptical about the audio on those because I mean they're very
but I mean on these shows he films a lot. He just actually Josh Gates just got done with his like theater tour. But yeah, they film a lot of footage for those shows and then only use a little bit of it.
Thank God he didn't get on that submersible going down to the Titanic. Oh my God.
Dude, I mean that's what happens when you make, you always hear about the guys that, hey, I built this glider in my garage. It's like, yeah, and then they're dead. It's like,
yeah,
that's unfortunate. I watched a show the other day where they were the wife of the guy that was down there, the guy that runs that whole thing, and she's talking, and you hear that boom, and she goes, "What was that?" And I was like, ugh. Just thank God that happens. Did you see her husband that was running that thing?
Yeah.
So they got his pen and 2 business cards that he had in his shirt pocket. The pen still worked.
Was it a Bic?
He was incinerated with his clothes. Yeah, it might have been.
The Bic pen commercials a long time ago.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But the business cards were like pristine.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about when that thing imploded, the fireball it created. Like the guy one guy was talking about like a deep sea implosion of a sub versus the speed of a cat versus a snake versus a human being able to detect an object thrown at your face.
Yeah.
They said that implosion happened so fast that, it's just like turning off the lights. Like those people exploded, and then there was a huge fireball, and they barely found any of their clothes, but they came up and they had 2 business cards that were in his pocket and his pen. And the guy was like, this thing still works. There's nothing wrong with it.
Oh yeah.
But the bodies are just, you'll never get me. There's no way I'd go down there.
I was on a sub for like 3 days, a Navy sub, and kind of an introduction thing. And I thought
Navy'd be all right.
Well, I thought no, too small. I'm 6'2". I'm not, you have to ball up to sleep or you have to hot rack or whatever. And so I told the guy, I said, can you guarantee me an Ohio class submarine? And the guy said, no, I can't. And I said, well, I'm going I'll be on the surface then.
My youngest daughter, her boyfriend, that's what he does. But yeah, I mean, on tested equipment, but when Josh Gates did the show about doing the show with that, he goes, we get in there and like, he's got video game controllers. And he's like, oh yeah, this ain't working. Like nothing was working. It's like, surface, get me the hell out of here.
Yeah. And they're bolted in. There's no,
but he wanted to take Josh and them down for the show. And Josh, I think his people were like, no, insurance ain't covering this shit.
Those little alarm bells in his head were going off like, no.
That would be my worst fear is you go down there and like, not even the implosion. I'd start praying for an implosion. If like you're dead on the bottom and you can't surface.
And you're running out of oxygen.
Yeah, exactly. It's
you think back, they had the Scorpion and the Thresher that were lost, and I just can't imagine.
I have no aspirations of going to space or the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It's
World War II subs, or when guys were on there and they knew they couldn't stop the flooding, or they knew whatever the angles and angles like this, and that you're watching the gauge, and you're like, it's going to happen.
Like in Charleston, they got that sub out front. Yeah, it's a replica, but like one of the first submarine attacks, and that damn thing like sunk, and all them guys just drowned. It's like, them guys had some balls back then.
Is that Civil War? The Civil War stuff, the Tuttle or something like that?
Yeah, they would pedal that thing up to a ship, and they had like a harpoon on the front with explosive. They'd stick it in and then back away.
a long spar.
And
Like
I think they were successful, but they didn't make it back.
yeah.
So I mean, you got to imagine the orientation of that running rudders. Like, are we at the surface? No way in hell. We're about to hit 3 hours, man. We're gonna. I mean, you can talk, and we'll just go ahead and end the stream here.
Very good.
Appreciate everybody watching.
You wore me out. So
yeah, you see how fast this time will fly when you're sitting there just talking about this. And
I hope
this podcast, we go over so many subjects. We just hope it helps people out, or you know, people that have been doing this for a while and they're stuck. It's like, you know, pack a lunch. You got a lot of work to do, and
we might say something that triggers something, and it leads to something. You know.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, we had Mark on, we had Douglas on.
Yep.
Appreciate Chuck. Chuck, you can come on anytime you want.
Thanks.
We're going to do one in the future. Ben Asen said he wanted to come back on again, and I'll talk to you about that off the air, but I had an idea for Ben. So thanks for everybody watching.
Ben on the spot about photos. I'll give a heads up about his photos being altered and then being entered into the book.
I'd like to see how you had to post on the page and ask him that.
Yeah.
They may have been. So thanks for everybody for watching, and see you next time.
Bye.